View from the Gutters, episode 67.now, number 1. Welcome to View from the Gutters, the comic book podcast where each episode we discuss a collected edition, trade paperback, or graphic novel, and then recommend and vote on the book for the next episode. Warning: the discussion portion of this show has massive spoilers for that book. On this episode, we discuss All-Star Superman, again. And, to skip ahead to the recommendation section, skip to 139.41. Welcome to another episode of View from the Gutters, but this one is a bonus episode, because we didn't talk enough about Superman.
We didn't.
No.
So, I'm Andrew Chard.
I am Joe Preti.
Eric Manix.
And I am Kerbotron.
I thought you were going to say Kate Reynolds for
and
a minute.
I'm Kate Reynolds.
Yeah. So we didn't talk enough about Superman, and three of my favorite people to talk about Superman were all busy on Monday, so we didn't want to let everyone down and not put an episode out. So we put an episode out, and it's not like that episode is shitty. It's a great episode, but this is extra episode. It's like a bonus, a two-parter. So
we love you.
We'll talk about all the same stuff, and it'll be super boring, and you guys can pick which one you like better.
I've actually scripted the entire first podcast, and we are going to recite it verbatim.
Who's playing the part of Toby? Is that you?
I'll be playing the part of Toby.
It's going to be the same, but with like more explosions.
I'm an old man.
Just be Toby. Can that be the thing?
Yeah, we'll just all read Toby's parts to each other.
You whippersnappers in your damn Superman comics.
Stan Lee now.
I don't know.
Toby sounds nothing like Stan Lee.
No, he doesn't. He sounds like it's weird. Weirdly enough, he sounds exactly like Toby. It's really weird.
Whoa, that's
it's like eerie. It's eerie.
What a coincidence. So I talked the whole episode last time. So Joe, Kirby, Eric, you guys have to do rock, paper, scissors over who goes first, which is perfect for our audio. I'm kidding. Joe, what do you want to talk about this book?
Well, shit. I mean,
all right, that's too much. Kirby, you go first.
No, I want to
Kirby's
go
turn.
first.
Okay, fine.
Can I just go first?
I just lost everything.
I thought maybe I would talk a little bit during this episode, but
Yeah.
Oh,
whoa.
Snap, burn.
I have to go home with her.
I was going to say, you got to go home with this. You got to stop, brother.
You got burnt, son.
Woo.
Oh, well, I don't know. Like, when I was reading it again, I was kind of like, well, I wanted to talk about my favorite parts of the whole series. And I think my two favorite ones are when Superman goes back and is talking to Jonathan Kent. Oh my god,
It's my favorite episode, my favorite issue.
Yeah,
it's the most convoluted, but I love it.
It's so sweet, and it is a little convoluted, but the part where he's out there in the field with his dad, and then he's like, we were so heartbroken that we couldn't have children, and then we prayed to the gods and you came. I just thought that, even though I'm not religious in any way, shape, or form, I just thought that was the sweetest thing. Just the thought of him praying to something that he might not necessarily be associated with, and then Krypton is kind of considered a godlike, Superman's considered a god figure, and then him coming down after he prayed, I thought that was really cute.
Yeah.
And it's kind of touching in a way, you know?
It's interesting too, because it more mirrors the Moses story then, because in the story of Moses, they pray for a child, and then Moses comes floating down the river. Where in the original Superman origin, I don't think they mentioned that Jonathan Kent, they prayed. Maybe it does. I don't remember. Because Siegel and Schuster were Jewish, right?
Yeah.
The original, he's they don't even get mentioned at first, and then he was adopted. Mom and Pa can't find him, but they're not called. They're called something else at first, and because one of the things they've retconned 100 times. But at first, a kindly couple picks him up and takes him to the orphanage, and then later they retcon it so that they take him to the orphanage, but then they change their mind, and then they adopt him. And then, later, there's just no adoption process at all. It's kind of we find him and he's just ours, and we pass him on as ours.
It's part of the huge anti-orphanage lobby that was going on in the 60s.
Well, they've also added a bunch of stuff that mom and pa can't miscarried. That's in some origin stories.
Yeah.
I think that's in Smallville, maybe.
I know in Man of Steel, or the John Byrne era
Yeah.
stuff. It was post Crisis on Infinite Earths. It was mentioned that they
That's what it
tried
was.
several times.
Yeah.
And that version, it was there was a snowstorm for like 10 weeks or something like
That's right.
super extended period, and so it's like they just were like, yeah, because Byrne tries to like through his kind of comic book pseudoscience explain everything, even like his power set, which is one of the things I thought was fun about that.
Oh, definitely.
That run.
Yeah, I think that's one of the like the tactile telekinesis.
Yeah, well, like he would like lift something up and like interesting as I'm flying with this thing, it seems to get lighter, and like I don't know, just like. It's all comic book science, but at
he's a
least
big like science nerd.
yeah, but at least he's thinking about.
He's a
But
nerd.
it's funny
No, John
'cause-
Byrne's like a big science
I
fiction
don't-
fan because he loved Star Trek so much too. Like he
Yeah.
writes most of the Star Trek stuff for
IDW?
IDW. Well, he did for a while. I don't know if he writes most of the current stuff, but he's written a lot of Star Trek comics.
Yeah. I think a lot of people don't take the time to realize or really think about. They may realize it in some kind of like abstract way, but if you walk up to a car, if you were strong enough to lift up a car, you would have to like get underneath it and lift it up by the frame because those parts are like the bumper is just bolted on. It's just like plastic that's bolted on. If you went to lift up a car by its bumper, the bumper would rip off in your hands.
Yeah.
Most likely just the part you were holding.
Yeah.
If you went to lift it up by its car door, you would just like rip that off because the force needed to like actually lift it would be more than that could bear.
Yeah.
In most cases. So like this idea that he was like slapping this telekinetic field on it and then that was holding it intact and allowing him to do it was an interesting idea.
Yeah.
But I think that's a great idea, but I'm also a big fan of like you're reading a comic book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It takes place in a world where there's a guy that can run at the speed of light.
Yeah, you're suspending your disbelief.
Just suspend your
anyway.
disbelief. It's okay. You don't need an explanation.
Yeah, we don't need the Speed Force to understand why.
Well, I like the Speed Force because at pre-Speed Force, Wally is eating all the time.
Yeah.
And then like
I need like 16 Snickers.
like it's a
like
big
four
thing
double
too because
cheeseburgers,
he's like, oh, I need to go out and do this thing, but I
Yeah.
need to bring in like I need to have food with me because otherwise I'll like peter out. And so like when the Speed Force comes up, it's like, well, this is what I tap into. This is what energizes me. And it's like, okay,
Again, it's both of those are bad explanations of why the Flash Wally can run fast. Like he can run fast because it's a comic book.
right?
Yeah.
Well,
Like
and that's
you don't need
but-
either one. You don't
and-
need the Speed Force to explain
or
why he
the
can run,
food, yeah.
or that he needs to eat 10,000 million calories a day.
But
Like, you don't need either one.
See, not to get too far into this digression, but I felt the Speed Force was like super comic booky because they never explain
Yeah.
what it is. It's
Well,
just like
except
it's the Speed
now
Force.
that
Well,
John's totally.
I was like,
explaining what it
fuck.
is.
I was about to say,
We're not
can we
gonna-
say fuck the John?
Yeah, we're not
going to
fucking talk
Barry
about that.
Allen apparently generates the
I'm
Speed Force. out of
like,
his ass.
I apologize
Fuck
if
that
this offends anybody, but seriously, even pre-52, fuck Jeff Johns' run on the Flash.
Yeah.
It's like one of the worst things I've ever read. And like, you can give me shit about that. That's fine. I'll fucking fight you in the parking lot after we record this. All right. So you bring that fucking shit. Okay. Cause
Yeah.
I'll be waiting. Especially coming on top of, Mark Waid.
Coming on top of Mark
Kirby's
Waid,
like
things I didn't think I'd hear
fucking
today.
like socking her palm, and she's like, "I don't have to fucking fight you in the parking lot. I'm going home with you later." Especially coming on top of Mark Waid's run, who was doing more explorative stuff. Like,
Yeah.
I
This
feel
is a really
like
good Flash podcast, you guys.
yeah, but
Like,
not. We're not gonna get into that. We're gonna talk about
Kirby, you had a
Superman, so
second
yeah.
favorite moment in the
Yes,
comic.
what
and
was
you
your
had
second
only
favorite
mentioned
moment?
your first one. Did
Oh,
you
yeah.
forget what it was? Because Joe was talking too much?
No,
Oh,
I
good.
never forget this one. My second favorite moment is, of course, the end where he like flies into the sun to
Yeah.
like work the sun and make it not bad anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Like, it's weird because I'm not a huge fan of the art in this book. Like, I think that the faces get kind of weird sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of,
I think Brant put it really well that they look doughy.
they do look doughy. And I thought that too.
And the
And
clothes get all rumpled all the time.
Yeah,
It's like weirdly super realistic, but at the same time not realistic at all.
Yeah.
It's like both.
I just feel I really like when the lines are very deliberate, and I feel like it's not very deliberate. Like, I mean, it wasn't distracting because I love this story. It's probably my favorite Superman story that I've read, but like, it's just, I don't know, the art's not my favorite. But
Feels pretty loose sometimes.
yeah. But when he flies into the sun and there's that big splash page of him just like there
Yeah.
doing the thing. I'm like, that's going to be my tattoo. That's my Superman tattoo.
with his
One day.
shirt off, and he's got like the.
It's like
It's like a
thing.
hammer.
It's
Like
like
a
the
lever
John
or something.
Henry
Yeah,
pose.
it's like
Yeah,
he's
it's
just like
exact-
doing it like
I think it's actually probably predates the John Henry posters.
I
but
actually
I'm not actually
associate
sure.
it very closely with that. So if we're
Yeah.
wrong on that, please let us know if you
I
have
think it
another source.
may come from like there was all these like Soviet posters in like
That may actually- yeah.
but
That
I'm
makes
not-
sense,
But it's like
yeah.
early 1900s, late 1800s that were all about like the people we rely
Yeah.
on the backs of the workers, and it was like all this
yeah,
like
it's a very
because there were a lot of like not propaganda but semi-documentary films in the beginning of film about Russian workers making the railroad.
yeah. I mean, all that great Russian film
Because it was
comes out of that.
silent, but it
Well,
was like they
they
were
all
using
were.
image overlays and stuff. But
Yeah, they and all those Russian
that
films are propaganda.
might be what that's from. Just a
yeah.
guess.
Well, it does.
Either
It
one of
looks
those
like
two.
he's working hard.
Yeah,
Is the thing, and he's like doing it because that's what he needs to do.
yeah,
And of course, like leading up to that too, where he's like, "Okay, here we go. I need to do these things, and now I've done them. Here we
Yeah.
go." You know, it's like I got all emotional. Like I was at work reading it, I was like, "Oh God, here we go.
yeah.
Gonna do it."
To build on that, I think that speaks to the work, man. Like this
Yeah.
is an emotion. I get emotional reading this. Like when he comes and he's like, by facing the chronivore, you lost 3 minutes of your life, and in that 3 minutes, your dad died.
Yeah.
I mean, like that's crushing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and the fact that he's able to go back and just spend those few more minutes, and he can't let Pa know, right?
But
he can't
I
be
think,
there.
I think Pa knows though.
Yeah.
I
He's kind of welcoming.
I think
like these
he
strange
has an
To a
idea.
guy with a
I don't know that
bandage
he
face?
knows, but I
Yeah.
think he's got an idea.
yeah,
And to have that kind of closure is really incredible. And I think that whole arc, like all of this, and I'm sure I know you guys talked about on the
Yeah.
podcast on Monday, like this is
It came
Grant
out on
Morrison doing an
Wednesday.
exploration of Superman the character. But what this book means to me, and like me and Kirby have talked about this a lot, is this is the answer to everybody that says Superman can't be interesting, Superman's overpowered, Superman is boring, Superman
Yeah.
is unrelatable. It's like
the thing that really bothers me about that is the idea that every challenge to a character is physical.
yes,
It's
Yeah.
like
Yes.
you're correct. Nothing physically will challenge Superman. So now a writer has to do something that's more difficult than physically challenging a
Absolutely.
character, which is challenge them emotionally, give them some internal conflict, give them some external emotional conflict. Like, hey, you have to choose between saving this kid that you've been around a bunch or this boat full of people.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
they both
Right?
can't live, and
And-
you have to live with that as Superman. Like, that's the kind of stuff that Superman lives with every day, because every time he hears calls for help, how often do you think someone's calling for help
and
in the
he
world?
hears it all.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the thing. If this whole idea that and Kirby showed me this article the other day, which is like, why you're wrong about Superman or whatever, and he made some interesting points. But in the comics, this guy was like, he just needs to fight tougher villains, and I'm like, you just missed the fucking point. Like you totally missed the point. It's not about how hard he can punch.
Right.
It's the fact that he doesn't want to.
yeah.
He wants to try and find, like, he is all about, like, getting along. He's all about compassion and empathy and understanding. And, like, yeah, he'll punch the shit out of something if he has to.
Right.
Like, he has no compunction about that. But, like, he would much rather figure out what's going on and, like, try and solve it. And, like, Grant Morrison, for me, in this book, hits all the notes. Like, Superman isn't a fucking dummy. He's not the high school football captain.
No.
He's a compassionate, caring, intelligent, curious, and interesting person that has like hopes and dreams above and beyond what we see in like what's normally going on with him.
And I think that something that people forget all the time is like, there's a way that Superman reminds me of the Doctor in Doctor Who, because it's his undying empathy of alien races. Because Superman lives on a planet full of aliens to him, right?
Yeah.
And he has the most empathy in the world for Earth. Like, it's so important to him. And when people are like, oh, we're here to crush Earth, he's like, I won't let you. It's my home. Even when Kryptonians are like, I'm going to make this the new Krypton.
Right.
He's like, no, this isn't Krypton. Like, this is my home. You don't get to tell them what to do. Like, I'm here to help them be better, not rule them. And the two Kryptonians that are there on Earth that are like, why did you not rule these people? And he's like, because I don't want to. I don't have to. These people can rule themselves.
That's exactly it right there. He's there to make us better.
Yeah.
He's there to enhance humanity.
Yeah.
Well, this is a concept that we talked about with Kingdom Come. One of the things I love, because it's like, you know, in that story, it was like all the super extreme killer, you know, superheroes kind of take over. It's like, well, Superman was more powerful than all of them. He could have done that. He could have killed the Joker and anyone involved. He could have ruled with an iron fist. He chose not to because he respects our laws and our morals. And he couldn't, you know, bring himself to do basically what we wanted him to in that particular story. It wasn't within his moral code. As at the time, the will of the people was, we want the Magogs of the world, and he wasn't willing to go there. But at the same time, he wasn't going to stop the people that they wanted to, you know, and enforce those things.
Well, he's not here to force his ideas on anyone, because even if he has these ideas that are like, I could make the world a utopia, it's not going to be a utopia for everyone. It's just going to be a utopia for people that think like Superman. Which... Yeah, I think that's something that people forget about when it's like, oh.
Did you guys mention like the setup for this book with like how it's like he finds out he's dying in the beginning, and because to me that's one of the most interesting things about it is basically Superman through machinations of Lex Luthor gets overexposed to solar radiation, and so it's killing his cells. So basically he's dying. That's what I like about this. One of the many things I like is, so he finds out he's dying right away. Instead of trying to cure himself, he basically tries to set up the world to go on without him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because he's that like selfless of a person. And it's like, to me, it's like the whole story is this kind of like 12 labors thing where it's like, all right, since I do, you know, this, and this to ward off aliens and, you know, keep people safe, what would that look like without me here? So he does like fascinating things like free the people in the bottle city of Kandor. That's one of my favorite moments when he like sticks his hand out and they're like shooting out and stuff like that. It was like super powerful to me.
Because they do more than he does with that's like, oh yeah, these people have like a massive, amazing knowledge of science and medicine.
Oh yeah,
that like they could figure out how the human body works pretty quickly and start to fix people. I love that. I think that's the best thing that's ever been done with the Bottle City of Kandor.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Like hands down.
Yeah.
And this book has not just one of my favorite like Superman scenes ever, but probably one of my favorite panels in all of comicsdom, which is when and I can never remember her name, but the girl is I talk about this in my blog post.
Yeah.
The girl's gonna jump.
Oh yeah.
And
we definitely talked about this on the last episode.
Like that is such
Regan.
That's her name. That's her name. And he's just like, you're stronger than than you think you are. Trust me.
Yeah.
And that to me, that's like in that moment I could just kiss Grant Morrison.
Well,
like,
it's Superman giving you the power to save yourself.
Absolutely, which is what at his core he is all about, right? He's not a big blue Boy Scout.
Right.
He is a character that believes in us to the point that he would sacrifice all the incredible fucking things he could do.
Yeah.
Anywhere he wanted to.
Yep.
To be here with us and watch us grow.
Yeah, it's something that I think it's Batman says at one point in something, and maybe it's Kingdom Come. Actually, maybe Wonder Woman says it. I'm misremembering this, but it's something about Superman as in like he's the best of us, but it's what he does that makes us better.
Yes.
Like as superheroes, like they not only look up to him to like lead them in a fight against
Wonder Woman said that in Kingdom Come.
Yeah, okay, it was Wonder Woman. Now, it's like he's not only there to just like show up and punch guys really hard, and you go, oh, now I know how to punch guys really hard. No, he shows up and he does the heroic right thing to do, and so now other superheroes are like, I can also do that.
Yeah, those are my favorite things about like the superhero comics, and one of the things that probably makes Superman my favorite, because the most interesting stories of him are like, okay, sure, you can like punch planets or whatever, but like, what are you gonna do with that?
Yeah.
You know, Like, I was actually talking to Matt about this because he was like over at our house. And like my favorite stories are the ones where it's like you have all this ability, you like portray this like character that, you know, you create by being a superhero. Why is that important? Why are you gonna like, how are you changing our lives by doing that?
Yeah.
And I think Superman's the one that really like goes out of his way to change our lives because he's the one that's like, I have all this power, but I'm not going to use it. I'm going to be like connected to you in a way that is interesting because, you know, I'm not you, but I like you and I
Right.
want you to be the best that you can be, sort of thing.
Yeah, in the post Morrison JLA and the modern JLA, I think Chuck Austin wrote it. It's called Pain of the Gods. He's hit or miss, but
Yeah. Mostly this movie.
As an X-Men fan, I don't think you're allowed to like Chuck Austin.
Yeah.
that's fair. This is, I think, he wrote the story, and I could very well be misremembering it. Maybe somebody else, but it's a story where it's basically each of the big seven like have some big failure, and there's the thread that's going on is basically in the beginning of the story, Superman. There's a burning building, and Superman goes in, and he's saving people, and he sees this other hero there who's holding up a portion of the building above like a propane tank or something, like the building gets its heat from propane or something like that, or like a gas tank of some sort. And he's like, go and save them. I'm good here. Like, but he's straining, and Superman doesn't realize it. He's concentrating on getting people out.
Yeah.
And before he can get back in, the building blows and it kills this guy. And Superman has to go and tell his family and his son that like, hey, I'm sorry, I didn't save your dad, right? And like the most interesting thing to me is that the guy's son like fucking hates him.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't see Superman, he doesn't see all the people that Superman saved. All he sees is that Superman didn't save his dad. And to me, that's what you do with Superman,
Well, it's
right?
like
It's
I was
like because he
saying
can't
earlier.
fucking punch that. He can't use his fucking heat vision
Yeah.
to cut that out. Like, he will always have not saved that guy.
Well, Superman has to live with the choices that he makes.
Absolutely.
Like which person he selects to save.
Yeah.
Because sometimes he can't save everyone.
Absolutely.
One of my other favorite scenes in this book is when Pa Kent is having a heart attack and Superman is flying so fast that his hair is on fire.
Oh, God,
yeah,
that's
he's
incredible.
gotta
Yeah.
go.
But I love that because it's like, wow, how insanely like crazy powerful is this guy? You get to see it just visually in that. But then he can't save him, you know, and it's something, of course, they've brought it many times, but, you know, he can't punch cancer in the face. Like,
Right.
Superman can't do everything. For all the wonderful things that he can do, you know, he can't do everything. And that's one, I think, like, Superman the movie that, you know, also had that, you know, a similar kind of really powerful scene like that, where, and I think that's one thing with, like, with Man of Steel, for example. I didn't care for the way that Paul Kent went in that one.
Oh, it's the worst.
Yeah.
I would have
mentioned that
way
in the
rather
last
had
one.
the heart attack,
That
and
was annoying.
because then you
Yeah.
get the lesson that
That
you
was annoying
can't
for
fix
him.
everything.
Right.
Like, you can't.
This
Because
is-
with that one, it's like, no, you still could have saved him.
Right.
Like, and to me, that's like, so then you chose not to, and then like,
Yeah, your
even
dad
though-
told you not to say like your
No,
dad.
Yeah.
Pa Kent was suicidal. In
Yeah,
that
no, because
movie.
I'm like, basically chose to die. Like, that's actually stupid. Like, yeah, like that's dumb.
Everybody, Brandt actually does this a lot. I'm like, I don't know about this movie. And he's like, no, Goyer's writing it. It'll be good. And I'm like, Goyer wrote that fucking scene. And let me tell you something. I liked Man of Steel, and I think that scene was fucking stupid.
I enjoyed Man of Steel a lot.
I
more than
enjo-
everyone
I
else know.
enjoyed
But
it.
Yeah,
I
I still
love
was.
it.
I think it's the
But-
best Superman
Yeah.
movie we're going to get out of this generation,
Yeah.
but that was
I think it's the worst movie I've ever seen.
ridiculous.
I liked it a lot better until I saw Captain America: Winter Soldier, though, and then because at first I was like, well, they have to reinvent it for modern audience, and I was like, no, Cap's still Cap, even
Well,
if the dark
that-
movie Cap
that's-
is still Cap. So
Actually,
so I like
I
it
wanted
less.
to bring up the Cap parallel because I think it's a really strong parallel.
Absolutely.
Superman is, well, as we've said, kind of like gives hope to the DC universe, gives hope to the people in the DC universe, and like lets them see what kind of version of themselves they would like to be, right? Well, I think that Cap does something very similar, but in the Marvel universe, it's limited to he only does it for the people of America. And you have to remember that, like, Superman is known, he's more like Thor in the Marvel universe. How they're writing Thor now is
Yeah.
like he's known as a god throughout space.
Oh, yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
People will show up and they're like, "Oh fuck, it's that Kryptonian."
Well,
like
this
they
is-
know
yeah.
who he is.
This is my favorite kind of idea of Superman is, oh, he's like Clark's at dinner with Lois and they're celebrating something, and then he's like kind of cocks his head and he's like,
Yeah.
just kind of holds his finger up and he's gone, and then he's back and he's
Right.
like, I had to put out a fire on an oil tanker.
Right.
That's it. But it's cool because I fly really, really fast and I do everything really fast. Like, it's this whole idea that like he's looking out for us. And I think that's compelling. And I understand, like I talk about this in my blog post about Superman, but I understand the leaning towards Batman in pop culture, because what Batman has been boiled down to in pop culture is somebody that solves all of his problems with violence and has the wherewithal to like deal with those problems head on, right? He's rich.
Well,
He's capable of defending himself on every level, and they've boiled out the intellect and the empathy.
I disagree,
and, like,
because I think that something that everyone always brings up in any argument of like who would win, Batman or whoever, is like, well, Batman would already have plans involved. Like, he's the Bat God that Grant Morrison wrote him as,
but
where like he's just smarter than everyone else. That means he
and
wins.
That's exactly what I'm getting at. But it's always like smart in a martial way. It's never like, people are never saying, no, wait, like Batman is like, he, like Bruce Wayne is very important, right? Because he oversees Wayne Tech, which has many subsidiary charities, and he's very involved in like other things. And like Batman himself, like, is a detective. He's, he's somebody that's smart, not in just a tactical way.
But I mean, that's something that you and I choose to like really appreciate about Batman, because we like crime fiction and detective fiction.
Yeah.
But like for people who don't give a shit about finding clues and like following the trail to the bad guy, Batman works because he is multifaceted. Brant brought this up on the episode, but like Batman has always had titles that talk about different things in each book. Like Detective Comics is a different Batman than the Batman in Shadow of the Bat, or the Batman in the Batman book, or the Batman in Legends of the Dark Knight. Like, they're all different.
Yeah.
And Batman has many more facets. But Superman has a pure essence that cannot be changed. And I think that that's the problem that people have with Superman, is he is Superman. Like, Grant Morrison distilled everything about Superman that there possibly could be down into this one character, and it all fits together. Like, there's no contradictions there.
No,
and the
not.
Justice League Batman contradicts very heavily, I think, with the Gotham-centric detective Batman. I think there's conflicts within that character, and that's why everyone can like Batman, because there's 20 different versions of Batman.
I don't disagree with you, but I think that in the mind of the masses, in like pop culture, Batman is very singular. Like in his facets, like I don't think there's a lot of people like, and Alex, that facet is badass, right?
Right.
And like
he's whatever you want him to be for the story,
right? And that's kind of like, there is no appreciation for these other facets that he has. There are among us, but like most people are like, oh yeah, Chris Nolan, Batman.
Well,
woo!
most people know Batman through either the films, the animated show, or the Chris Nolan
and the
movies.
animated show is a much better example.
But it's also old now.
It is. No, absolutely.
We think back on it fondly, but I was a kid when that show came out. Like,
I was,
there are plenty of people who are adults now who'd probably never watched that show.
Yeah.
And so the adult conception of Batman is mainly based on Chris Nolan's Batman, who was not a detective.
No, and that's sad.
Batman is not the world's greatest detective.
Because I think they also do it. It's the dumbing down of superheroes, which is why Marvel is so much better right now, because they're not dumbing down their superheroes.
Well, they're accepting their comic book nature.
Yeah.
Well, in researching Captain America for the Winter Soldier coming out and just doing a ton of reading, since there's some parallels to Superman, I'm going to paraphrase because I don't remember exactly what this person said, but they boiled down like Steve Rogers like perfectly. It was like, he was just this kid and he struggled and then became the super soldier, and so there's this facet of him that is like this like American propaganda like inspiration piece, but he is a real person, and like he is totally cognitive of his most people's view of him, and he basically struggles every day to maintain that, because it's like, he has relationships with his Sharon Carter and like the Falcon and like even his villains, and he has doubt and he does screw up majorly at times, but there's definitely that added burden of, yeah, but dude, you're Captain America. And I think
Right.
Superman's a similar thing where it's like you guys mentioned on the last one, the Smallville Clark is like the actual like unfiltered version
Yeah.
of him, where he can truly be himself with like Lana Lang and Mom Pa Kent and like Pete and whoever like
Yeah.
actually knows his secret. That's like 100% genuine.
He's kind of
Clark
that way
Kent.
with Lois too. Like,
Yeah, Lois,
because-
like in the old continuity at least, yeah, like you're getting 100%, him, where like Metropolis Clark is like geez, like,
yeah, he's
the
like,
fumbling because he had to.
hunched over,
And then,
like,
just like,
pretending to be
because
a bumble.
people always debate, who's the mask, is it Clark or Superman? But it's like, I definitely think there's 3 different versions,
Yeah.
and I think Smallville Clark is like real Clark.
Yeah,
if
no,
you're
I
like,
totally agree.
talking the genuine, persona, because Superman, of course,
Well,
is,
it's the Clark we see when he's like not in public as Superman with the
Yeah.
big S on his chest,
Yeah.
hands on his fist stance. Like it's the Superman that we see who's just like hanging out around the Watchtower,
And I
like
think-
with his friends.
That's
Yeah.
part of what makes him boring to people who maybe don't know the character that well, or is I think Superman is aware of the influence that he has on little kids and things
Mm-hmm.
like that. That's why he'll be like, "Oh, brush your teeth," and things that like people it's like, "Oh my god, he's such a dork." You can make
Yeah.
fun of him, but it's like, you know what? That little kid listened. He did.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
exactly.
You know he
Like,
did.
Superman told him to.
So it
brush
can
his
come
teeth,
across
so
as
he
lame
will.
if you didn't know,
No,
but he's very aware of like his status.
And
You know
like
what I mean?
what he says, it matters. Like,
And the fact that he's
people
using it to
listen.
better people, like, that's the thing. I was like, Superman's like a good person. If he was an actual person, he'd be a good person. He'd still be like a
That'd be
flawed
great.
human being with a heart that you can break.
He
But
would-
he's
yeah.
a good person. Like, why do you think that's messed up? Like, I love Batman as a character. I think he's a lot of fun. But like, Batman is like fundamentally broken as like a human being. And
Yeah.
like, so when people are like, I relate to Batman, I actually like no, you don't really. Like, I think you think since he's human, like you're that's.
He's
Can-
broke. Batman is a broken.
Batman doesn't
human
truly
being.
love anyone. He can't. He doesn't like look at like say with like Selena Kyle, for example, right? They'll start to hook up like in Hush, and how many other times has that happened? And any time things start to go well, it's like, oh, but you're a villain, and this is my code. But it's like that's him throwing up that wall, though, because
Right.
he can't. Even with like the Robins, even with Alfred, I mean, he never. I'm not saying he doesn't care for them, because I know he does
He
in
do-
some
yeah.
way. He is still human, but he's after his parents, it's like part of him did die then, and
Well, and also he's committed himself to an unwinnable war
Yeah.
on crime.
Well, and
Like,
yeah,
he knows that he's gonna either die doing this, or at some point he'll
Yeah.
have failed.
like
and
with Batman,
retired.
it's like Bruce Wayne is the mask. At
He
this point,
can't-
clearly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and this is an interesting point, right? Like Batman's fundamental flaw is that he can't deal with closeness, with being close to people, because he can't deal with the thought that he might lose them, right? Because that he just can't deal with that. He's been through that,
Yeah.
and he continues to go through that. Let's be honest. But and yet he knows he needs it, and so he surrounds himself by people that have constantly are walking a tightrope, and then like when freaks out on them when they don't do exactly what he wants, right? But like his closest associates have no problem looking at him and there's a scene in Bruce Wayne Fugitive when Batman's up on the rooftop and Superman comes and he's like, Bruce, you're in trouble. And he's like, I'm not Bruce anymore. I'm Batman.
yeah.
Right? And he's just like, blah, 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 blah. I'm a boner.
Bruce Wayne's dead.
Bruce Wayne's dead. I'm a boner.
Yeah.
And
As Superman's
like-
flying away,
so he's
Superman's
just
like,
like,
let me know if you need
any help.
anything, Bruce.
Bruce, right? And that's like because that's how you treat him.
Yeah.
Because basically, fucking Batman, and I love Batman is probably one of my favorite characters.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely one of
Me
my
too.
favorite characters. He's a fucking grown up emo kid, right?
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes you just gotta smack him and take away the fucking eyeliner and just tell him to fucking like walk it off.
I think that there's such a huge correlation and relationship between Batman and Superman, both like in the comics and also just like in their fictional universe. Like they often share books together. But Superman, the emotion that I would describe that describes him best, I think, like the emotion that he feels all the time is probably empathy. Like he's an empathetic person.
yeah.
And, like he can relate to other people, and that's why he's such a great hero.
Yeah.
But Batman's main emotion is like guilt or remorse.
Yeah, absolutely. I
Like,
agree with that.
He feels guilty for not doing more.
And it's the problem I have when people say that Bruce is the mask Batman wears. In some ways, I agree with that, but I also think that Bruce is what keeps Batman sane.
Yeah.
The fact that he has this, and it's very similar to
I would even go further.
to
That,
Superman.
like, it's his friends that he can be around without the mask on. So it's
Yeah.
like, Alfred keeps him sane. Being Bruce Wayne keeps him sane. The Robins keep him sane. But
One of-
most
yeah.
of all,
Well, and that's the
Clark
thing.
keeps him sane more than
And
anyone else.
that's exactly the point I'm making, is that those people, they're not fucking there for Batman, because Batman doesn't need anybody.
Right.
But Bruce fucking needs as many people as he can get.
My
to
favorite
have his
era
back.
of Batman is when Tim Drake is introduced, in the late 80s, early 90s. Like,
Love
that
that
to me is
early
that
stuff.
golden period, especially like the Alan Grant and Norm Brayfogle stuff. But
So good.
because, after Death in the Family, Batman does crack for a while,
Yeah.
he does the loner thing, and he kind of realizes that he does need a Robin to kind of balance out his psyche and to keep him in check. And then Tim comes along, and he's like, this awesome detective kid. He's like one of the only people that's ever figured out who he was, just using detective work. So, and then just having an emotional anchor there, really, I don't know. Also, just
his
brightens up
family
his
is
book a
like
bit.
the biggest that it's ever been at that point too.
It is,
Yeah.
and, and that's part of the thing. That's why, I like a lot of the Bat books now, but like during that period, it's like the books were still dark, like visually. There were still like some really, because Batman's like best villains are very like psychology based. I think that's really cool. But like Batman himself wasn't like as brooding and crazy at that point. Like he still had like a more fatherly relationship with Tim Drake, even though Tim still had his dad.
He
and,
tells him, he like calls him son sometimes, and is like, "I'm proud of you."
So I guess that's the version
something
I
that
grew up
no
on.
one-
So like
yeah.
mostly so like that's what I.
But at that point, he
had.
had Tim as Robin. He had Dick Grayson as Nightwing. He
Yeah.
has Alfred around. He has Oracle in his life. But he also has that other guy that lives in the cave and like works on the Batmobile.
Oh god, I
too.
forget his name, but the dude that was like always
it's like
making
Alan
weapons
or
and stuff.
something.
Yeah,
I can't
think so,
remember.
yeah.
what his name is.
the guy, I know who you're
He's like
talking
mute.
about.
He's like a deaf
Yeah.
mute or something, and he like is a mechanical genius. So he helps him build all this technology.
Yeah.
which is a cool twist
But-
too, because
Yeah.
that's nice that he has someone to fix the Batmobile when it breaks.
Yeah, right. But in the same way, and I was thinking about this today because this has bugged me for a while. In the end of Kill Bill,
Yeah.
David Carradine gives this
Yeah,
very
this is the
neat,
one I was talking about in the
neat
last.
and tidy speech about how Clark Kent is Superman's disguise, right?
Right.
It's like the mask he puts on. And at first I was like, oh, super clever, Mr. Tarantino. That's really good. But the more I thought about it, I was more like, no, this is a massive and comprehensive misunderstanding of Superman. Superman is both Superman and Clark. Like, Clark Kent is just as important to who he is as being Superman.
But they're
is
both
because
masks, though.
they are, because he's really like,
He
at
never
the
gets,
core of his being, there's this creature named Kal-El.
right. But I
who
mean,
is-
like when he's on the farm with Ma and Pa Kent, when he's not putting on an act for anyone,
Yeah.
that's when he's the most at his.
Well, yeah,
you
when
know.
he's on the farm, or when he's with Bruce
he's
and
with
Diana.
Lois, or-
Well,
Yeah.
you
or
could
when
say
he's
like
with
Metropolis
Lois.
Clark is very into social justice. He's still like helping people out in his
Yeah.
own way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I like. Is even though he's kind of like in his mannerisms, kind of bumbling and meek and mild, like his stories report corruption and fraud and things
Oh,
like
yeah.
that. So even as Clark, he's helping people.
Yeah, and like
because he can't turn that off.
The disguise isn't Clark Kent. The disguise is the hunched over,
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
exactly.
tripping over shit,
Mumbling,
mumbling,
soft-spoken.
like,
Yeah.
oh shucks, I'm
Yeah.
I'm corny as Kansas on the
I'm
4th
just
of July.
It's a country boy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's like Clark Kent, the person, is as much a part of Superman as
'Cause
anything
I-
else is, because
it's-
it's what connects him to
Yeah.
us.
It's something that it doesn't come across in the book, but I always imagine that he not only like speaks softer, but he puts on his accent a little more.
A little
he
bit
throws
more.
on his
What
Kansas
does
City
he
a
say
little
to
more.
Paige? Like, oh my land, or something, and then he like runs out of the office, and Barry's like, oh my what?
Yeah. And I imagine that him as like Superman, he like tries to sound
Yeah.
super heroic.
And there's this great idea that the reason the glasses work is because it's not just the glasses.
Yeah.
It's
We
the
talked
fact,
about this. For
Yeah,
sure on
he's
the other
paunchy,
episode,
and he kind of like because
Frank
like
quietly draws that idea like,
really fucking well.
majestically.
Absolutely.
He does do that
It's
well.
so
Yeah,
good.
I
the
hate
art is
like
good.
for people that don't know, if you have good muscle control, you can make yourself look like you have a huge pot belly. Like you can definitely make yourself look fat.
Well, people will perceive you differently if you're
Act differently.
Yeah.
like I know people that are identical twins. I know people that are identical twins, and like one will be like a lot more outgoing, just really really out there, just talks a lot more, and then the other one will be like maybe meek, more quiet. Like I will find the louder one more attractive. I swear to God, and they're identical twins. No, they're identical twins.
Yeah.
I'm
Because,
like,
no, because confidence is important.
Because it's like for real, but that's part of it.
You're gonna
And
get
you
in
look at them
trouble when
differently.
your
You tend to
wife
look them
listens
more in
to
the
this
eyes,
again.
and like you tend to like pay more attention to them because they're louder and they're drawing more
Yeah.
attention. When the other one's just kind of like,
Yeah.
it's
That never happens
dude, I
to me.
believe it.
Yeah. Your wife's
That
getting
was-
real mad at you again.
I know, baby. Don't listen to the show. You should know. Just don't.
That was just me doing a really good
Anytime I'm
Manix impression.
Because I always listen to views when I'm like at home washing dishes and stuff, right? And my wife will come from work like, "Did you just say something about me?" Like, oh God, no, that wasn't that. I don't know who that was. That wasn't. Every time.
But I think
Can't
this
stop, won't stop.
word, son, word. I think this idea is fundamentally displayed in the fact that when he fucking changes into his costume, he doesn't change into it. He's already wearing it.
Yeah.
The
Well,
most iconic
You
vision of
mentioned in
Superman
the last
is him.
one when he stands up still as Clark Kent, and
Yeah.
just the posture, it's him.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Shoulders
It's like, yeah,
back,
like-
chest out, like, and
Which
those
is something
moments
that they didn't fucking do at all in Man of Steel.
No,
That
No,
movie's
they
terrible,
didn't.
and I will fight all of you. That movie's bad.
I'm not going to
Everything
defend
about
it.
that
I like
movie-
it. I'm
everything
not gonna
about that
defend
movie's
it.
bad.
I will say this.
Starting with Lois Lane, who's an awful character in that movie, and I kind of want to talk about Lois Lane in this book. Like, what did you guys think of Lois as a character in this book?
I didn't enjoy her as much. To me, she was one of the weaker elements because I grew up on the John Byrne Man of Steel Lois,
the
and
tough
she's
as nails.
tough as balls.
Oh.
I love that character. And she's like kicking terrorists in the balls and taking machine guns. Like, this is for Clark, motherfuckers. Like,
Yeah.
that Lois, and she's like lifting his waist and shit. Like that woman, I fell in love with. I was like that.
Yeah.
I could totally like. Why would Superman not love this woman? Like, and I love that too. She's like, stop me, the man. Shit. We're like,
Yeah.
50s Lois is like, I know you're Superman. I'm gonna jump out the window and kill myself so you can save me. Like,
Yeah.
she's not like mental like that. Like, she's like,
Hey, I liked it because I always think
it's
of
hilarious, but
I always think of I mean, I grew up with Christopher Reeve as Superman, so I
Yeah.
always think of Margot Kidder. And when Margot Kidder throws herself into Niagara Falls, which is stupid, and it's not the
it was
original
appropriate
scene.
for the time. It was appropriate for
Well,
the time.
it's not even like it's much cooler the way she does it in Donner's original cut, because what she does is she like basically
Well, also-
trips Clark so that he falls into the fire, and then she's like, oh,
In Donner's cut, it had all original 3 times she tried to reveal that that Clark Kent was Superman.
Yeah.
And in the non-Donner cut, it only happens once, which makes it look even more ridiculous.
yeah, exactly.
So the Donner cut adds back in the less ridiculous ones. It's the third one where she's like, all right, I really got to prove.
Yeah.
So I'll do the most dramatic thing. In the non-Donner cut, it's just like, that's the first thing she tries.
Yeah,
It's like,
I'm gonna throw myself into Niagara Falls.
That's crazy.
This is a bit of a side, but can I say I actually don't care for the Donner cut because
two?
the one I don't care for.
Oh,
Well, here's the
it doesn't
let
have the
me-
cellophane S. It's got the better Lois.
Oh, I'm not
moments.
saying the other version's better. I think regular Superman 2 kind of sucks too.
Oh, in the
But the one thing I didn't like about Superman the movie was when he fucking flies and makes the Earth turn backwards. I hate that. I hate it. I can't stand it. It drives me insane.
Well, that's
I love the rest of that
Golden
movie.
Age Superman, though. I
know.
Like, he was doing
I
that
still hate
shit
it,
all
though.
the time. Or
I
not
know.
Golden Age.
I know
sorry,
he did.
'cause Golden
Like,
Age
yeah,
couldn't fly.
he was
That
basically a
Silver
god
Age.
in the Silver Age. He was
Yeah.
basically a god. He didn't have to breathe. He could I'm gonna go hang out with fucking mermaids.
Yeah.
I used to love it. Like Superman would be like, I need money. I'm gonna fly into the ocean and find a fucking Spanish sunken ship.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
here's gold. Or I'm gonna fly to like Uranus and get like some rare minerals. It's like, I don't know. I
also-
do love that stuff for what it was.
But also that Superman was just so overpowered that there's like a guy in your universe called the Flash. Oh, what does he do? He runs the fastest.
And
anyone
you're
can
still
run,
faster than him.
except for Superman.
Yeah, like,
who's
you can't
faster.
even
It's
give him
like,
that.
Really?
That's one of the things. As much as John,
He's super, guys.
John's is
Yeah.
really hit or miss for me, but I gotta say I did enjoy the scene in Flash Rebirth when they're having a race. And he's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I won some of those races, and he's like, those from charity. Clark, boom! He's just
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah.
Like, not even close.
Yeah.
I did enjoy that.
Well, yeah, it's that idol worship thing where it's like, oh no, of course I'm gonna make my hero
Yeah.
the winner.
No, totally.
Yeah.
Although I will say that in Grant Morrison's JLA run, there's a scene where the Flash empties out the entire population of a country before a nuclear missile hits it.
Yeah.
Nice.
Somebody actually did the math on how fast he would have to be traveling. Because I'm like, well, the speed of light is really fast. So maybe, like, I'm not going to sit down because I'm not going to assume how many people he moved. But maybe that would work, but it seems a little tight, right?
Yeah.
He's moving at something like 4 quadrillion times the speed of light when he does that. Which, aside from the fact, is literally physically impossible. Like, the fucking forces he would be generating would destroy the entire
speed
universe.
Force
Who
gets
cares,
you,
though?
It gets
Because
you around that. Because,
Well,
and also, this is a
The
good thing I
Speed
want
Force
to bring up.
basically it controls time. It's kind of at least what John's has gotten at. So really, like, it doesn't. At least in comic book science, my understanding of the Speed Force is like basically you could stop the clock. So it's almost like to him it's all relative. So
Right.
like I always imagine the Flash doesn't even feel like he's moving fast.
Well, and
like it's
there's
just everything
that-
else is stopped. You know
Right,
what I mean?
and that's the thing is in the new Flash show trailer that they showed, because this is going to date this episode, but the trailer they showed a couple days ago, and in the trailer there's just fucking wind everywhere. Like anytime the Flash even like begins to move, like the wind and forces are going. And some of Flash's coolest powers are like vibrating so fast that he's invisible and like moving faster than you can see him. And if he's doing that and generating like a room full of wind, then like what's the fucking
What's the
point
fucking
of
point of it?
using
Yeah.
that power? It's like, whoa, a small tornado
Well, like,
broke out.
there's
in
no
this room.
windows in here, but somehow all the papers
Yeah.
flew off my desk.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I don't know. That was a quick aside about the Flash. No, the Flash has always like defied science because the idea was like
Yeah.
he's the fastest
Well,
man
and
alive.
that's what
and
you
it's
should
like,
be fucking
right.
doing with
That's
your superheroes.
Right.
I don't give a fuck about science.
No,
I want
exactly.
I want the Flash to empty out an entire
Exactly.
country
Exactly.
in like a millisecond.
Yeah.
Or whatever he fucking does.
Yeah.
Because that's cool. And that panel is incredible because he's like sitting there and like part of his face is still like extended into the Speed Force, like it's still catching up with him. So you're
Yeah.
catching him as he has just stopped with the last person, and like the fucking light is catching up to him, which is fucking great. It's so cool. Yeah,
It is nice to
the
see-
the Flash is faster than Superman. Period.
Yeah, it is nice to see like the modern age depowered Superman, even in a story that is like so Silver Age as this one.
Yeah. Well, it feels it. The thing I love most about this is it feels ageless because there's elements of the Silver Age,
Yeah.
but there's also so many elements of the Golden Age. Like, I love Jimmy Olsen in this.
Really?
I do because I love Jimmy Olsen. I think that Jimmy Olsen is a great character, and I think that a lot of people don't use him well. I think the only good part of
Countdown is when he becomes Turtle Man.
no,
Oh,
You're right.
my
No.
biggest shame in life is that I read the entire run on Countdown.
Oh, me
like,
too.
At a certain point, I don't know why I was reading.
why
it
would you
anymore. It just
admit that
hurt.
on air?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know why I was reading it.
Can we bleep that out? Can we
What?
bleep-
You've already judged me at this point. It's all good.
Yeah.
my only regret in life is that I read all of beep.
Yeah. Except that I had just referenced it seconds before.
You got to bleep it all
I
out.
have to
must have
bleep
been
that out
talking
too,
about
where he
Ulysses.
turned into Turtle Man and beep.
beep.
Nope.
Yes.
Um,
And Wolf Job.
Yeah. I don't like Jimmy Olsen. And here's why. I like this version of Jimmy Olsen, who's like a good writer,
Yeah.
but every other version of Jimmy Olsen, he's basically like the office intern. And who cares? Like, why is he an interesting character? And why is he Clark's best friend? Like, what the fuck is Clark doing, like, hanging out with Jimmy Olsen when
Well, but
there are, like,
that's
planets to
When
save?
he's written well, right? When you get him in the hands of a good writer, it's this statement about Superman and who he chooses to spend time with, right? Is like the fact that Jimmy had a Superman watch was like a conceit in the Silver Age. It was like, well, how does Superman always know what's going on? Oh, Jimmy's always getting into trouble, and he's always like, like
Jimmy
signaling him on the
replaces
signal
the
watch.
damsel in distress in almost every story.
Oh, he's
in the
yeah, he
season.
is.
No, he's
He
totally the
totally
damsel in
is. He
distress.
is.
But
Which
like,
is fine, I guess,
how
because it's like a very progressive thing to
Yeah, right.
have
It
the
wasn't
man
Lois.
be the. But you could
My
do
man needs
you
me.
could do that with a better character though.
I don't know. I mean, I like Jimmy Olsen. I like that he's just kind of this ordinary dude.
It just draws into question the blatant homosexuality that's going on
I view
between
it differently.
Superman
I
and
think
Jimmy
that's
Olsen.
a beautiful thing.
I
I
think
think
it's
the sacred love shared between two men
Yeah.
is a beautiful
No,
and
I
wonderful
agree.
thing.
I think it's the same reason that he likes Lois, though, because Lois is always, when she's portrayed correctly, she's not the most attractive woman in the world or even Metropolis necessarily.
Right.
She's not the smartest, but she's tough. She's tenacious. She's kind. She can't spell worth a damn, but she's a great,
Well, and I like
Well,
he,
and
and
it's-
he loves her for, it's like, she's like the best of humanity is kind of how like I see it.
Yeah.
It's like he
He-
loves her for her 100%. He loves all the weird little quirks and the flaws and everything.
Yeah,
he wouldn't change the thing. And like I feel like Jimmy's like that too, where it's like Jimmy is this weird little fuck up kid, but it's almost like his annoying little brother or something. Where
Yeah.
it's like. It's like, as far as the contemporaries, of course, it's like, it might be more the Justice League level people or something that, can truly, relate to his daily
Right.
grind. But I think he likes being around, like, Lois and Perry and Jimmy because they ground him and kind of
totally.
remind
I
him
underst-
of why he does what he
I
does.
understand the function that they serve in
Yeah.
the story. It's just like I really
They're
don't
not
need
like friends, really.
Yeah, no,
they're not,
I don't need to see the adventures of Jimmy Olsen. I don't need to see Jimmy Olsen with superpowers. I don't need to see him like cruising around with the Micronauts or whatever. Like Jimmy Olsen works at the Daily Planet.
Yeah.
Let him do that.
Well, that's just a nod to the Silver Age.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
the book. Then you're talking the 50s. The book was
Superman
was so
pounds.
popular. It was like because like you mentioned before, Lois had her
Superman's
own book as
pal,
well.
Jimmy Olsen.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why they all had Superman in the title, of course, and he was always pretty much on the cover of each one.
Well,
Yeah, it's just like
he was still
Avengers
pretty much
right
in
now.
all of them anyway.
Back then, Jimmy was the guy you could like. And this is actually going to kind of bring me to something I want to talk about for a bit. But like, Jimmy was the guy you could relate to. Jimmy was the guy you could be.
Yeah.
right?
He was the Robin of
You-
this
Well,
book.
yeah,
Yeah,
well,
And especially as a
like,
kid reading.
Yeah,
Superman.
you could be
He's the
Jimmy,
sidekick,
man. Like,
yeah.
you couldn't like. Being Superman was something you couldn't do,
Right.
But you could be Jimmy Olsen, and Jimmy Olsen was best pals with Superman,
Right.
And that kind of connection is cool. But like, and I think that's interesting, from a relation standpoint, because I have a big problem with people that are like, I don't like this superhero because I can't relate to them. And I'm like, that's funny. I have never fucking related to a superhero because I don't have superpowers.
You can relate to superheroes without being one of them.
No, and I think that you can relate to aspects of a superhero. Like, I guess what I mean is this. I feel like when you say, I think it's valid to say, like, I relate to, like, Tony Stark being, like, kind of arrogant because he's insecure, right? Like,
Right.
or like Peter Parker, right? You can relate to certain aspects because you can kind of, but like, as far as putting yourself in their shoes, I guess you can do that to some extent, but I always think the whole, like, I don't find this character relatable as a critique
Yeah.
is kind of fucking hollow. Because it's like, like the whole Batman thing, it's like, oh, are you an orphan? No. Are you a fucking billionaire? No. Do you know every fucking form of fighting under the sun?
Yeah,
Are
but you
a
can
criminologist?
understand like regret and
But, like,
failure,
and
because that's what
those-
Batman's built on.
And that's kind of the thing. It's like those story elements you can relate to, right?
Yeah.
You can relate to how it feels like when you failed yourself.
Right.
That's something you can relate to. But saying that, like, you don't find Superman relatable, or that you don't find him interesting because he's not relatable, it's like, I don't understand exactly what that means. Like, you're only ever relating to aspects of these characters.
Yeah. No, I can understand that. And it is a term that gets thrown around to Superman a lot. It's like, I can't relate to him because he's an alien or because he has superpowers. And it's like, but you can because he's the most human of all of us.
Exactly.
But that's just, to be honest, we talk about a lot about like, people are like, Superman's not a good character. They're not even talking about the comics.
No, they're not.
They've never read the comics.
And
if you had, you would understand why Superman works. And I can understand you reading Superman comics and still not saying he's your favorite. Like, that's fair. I understand that he's not your favorite character, but he's still a good character.
Yeah.
He's still a strong, well-written character most the time.
I think what people forget is that Superman was ours first. He was a comic book character first. And I think that to come in and judge a character just based on what kind of floats around there ambiently in the pop culture, it's not fair. It's not fair to the character, and it's like saying that you watch the first season of Breaking Bad and now you know all what it means to be a fucking meth dealer.
Well,
you know?
And also it's just not paying homage to the creators that made that character.
Absolutely.
And also the creators that like curated that character for a long time, because although John Byrne wasn't like the originator of a lot of these ideas, he did introduce new ideas to that character and like curate that universe that involved that character.
Absolutely.
And he did it by paying homage to what that character stood for.
I don't think you get like the essence of the character if you just know like the basics. Like I was kind of, before I read Birthright, I was like, oh, Superman, like whatevs. Like,
Yeah.
you know, he was like, he grew up and he's like adopted or whatever and he does good. But then like after reading that one, and also they do a good job of it in this one, it's like, no, he's just a great person.
Yeah.
And he's very, like he's the perfect person.
Yeah.
And yeah.
He just has the intent of making everyone around him feel better by knowing that they can do better. And also he wants to spread the like trust and hope that he has for other people to the whole world.
Well, I think
through his good deeds.
Yeah. What gets left a lot behind, especially in the pop culture, is that, and this happens with Captain America a lot too, right? I think what people forget is who was creating these characters.
Yeah.
Captain America was created by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby, and Superman was created by
Siegel and Schuster.
Siegel and Schuster. And the thing is that these were all Jews. Superman is the ultimate immigrant story.
Yeah.
And Captain America, if you think about it, like a perfect Aryan kicking the shit out of Hitler. Like, come on, man. That's a great joke, right?
You know, they say it in the movie, and I don't think he ever said this line in the comic, but it's like a distillation of the idea of Captain America. He's like, I don't like bullies.
Yeah.
I don't
absolutely.
care where they're from. I'm not here to kill people.
Yeah.
But he's been bullied because he's like the young, scrawny kid.
Because he's the scrawny dude.
And it's the whole concept of like, if you give someone who understands what power is power, they're not going to abuse it.
Absolutely. And that's kind of the thing, is like, I think that's what's lost on a lot of people, is that, as with very similarly to Captain America, Superman came here and he was raised around this idea.
Yeah.
This idea that people are basically decent and good, and that he has the ability to change the world. And how is he going to change it? He's going to uphold this central kernel that his whole life has been built around, which is that people are good and decent. And that's what he will see in them. And he, like, the thing I love about this is that he even sees it, like, in the end, man.
Yeah.
Like, when Luthor finally gets it.
Right.
When he finally understands, this is how you see the world.
Yeah.
Like, how could you see it any way else?
Yeah, I think that something that this book and Birthright and other, you know, classic Superman stories did better than Man of Steel, which is, I think, garbage, is in Man of Steel, they put a lot of emphasis on Ma and Pa Kent, like, helping Superman understand how his powers work, which is bullshit. Like, they don't fucking know anything about Kryptonian power. Like, why is that an interesting part of the story? Like, why is Superman controlling his powers interesting to the story? This isn't the X-Men.
I feel
what they taught Clark is how to be a decent human being.
They're the moral compass in the comic.
Yeah.
That's one of the things with the New 52 I don't like, is Mom and Pa can't. We don't even get to meet them. They're just dead suddenly in the New 52, and that's why there's just super emphasis on the alien, where I like something especially like Birthright, where it's like he knows he's Kryptonian and he's really excited to learn, you know, via his tablet all about, you know, his heritage, and that's where he gets his outfit from. But at the same, I even like, you know, like how Pa Kent reacts to that, and he's kind of upset about that, as I think you would with your adopted kid. But he's like, dude, you will always be my dad. Like, you will always be. Like, I know where I came from, and that's awesome. But, like, you guys raised me, and that's even more a part of me. And, but it's the... they're his moral barometer, you know, and that didn't come across in the movie at all.
And that's why, well, it did in one scene. There's one scene.
Where they're sitting out by the truck?
No, where, I think it's where Jonathan Kent is showing him the ship, and Clark looks at him and he's like, what am I, like some alien? And Jonathan looks at him and goes, "No, you're my son."
Yeah.
And that's, I feel like if that had been bigger, if they had concentrated on that feeling, the feeling that they get in that moment, because that hit me, man. Like,
yeah,
that,
but it's actually the opposite that is more interesting, where, Jonathan is like, you're this alien and you have real parents out there.
Well,
and then Clark says, no, you're my real parents.
Well,
it's not
but-
about blood. Like, that's what it was in Birthright. It meant more for Clark to acknowledge the fact that Mom and Pa Kent were his real parents.
Which I agree with you, but I also think that there is... The thing I found interesting about that is that this idea that at some point Clark had to be like... I mean, because basically they age him up, because he finds out in the comics, in most of his origins, he finds out he's not human at a really young age.
Well, he knows he's not.
I mean, he always knows it.
He knows he
but,
has powers in Man of Steel. He just doesn't know where he's... They show him the ship, though, pretty young, right? In Man of Steel?
If I'm remembering correctly, yeah. But
It's
I think
like
he's
an
like a
early
teenager.
teenager, yeah,
maybe.
like-
Teen.
Yeah, I don't know. That's like about the time you could actually process that information.
yeah, I
And
mean,
not
maybe
tell
that
all your
scene
friends
just
at school, like, I'm an alien, guys.
what's up?
Which
What's
is what
up?
I would do.
Hey, you like football? I can play football. I
I have laser vision.
have laser vision.
I'm looking at your butts with my X-ray vision.
I think that, I mean, the new 50, one thing that the new 52 has done brilliantly is destroy Superman. And
Oh,
they've
yeah.
done that by,
It's
and I
their
don't want to
biggest
get,
crime.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
single biggest crime to me is that they've taken a dump on Superman. You've taken your best character, the best superhero in comics, the archetype from which everything else came, and you turn him into a whiny emo bitch. Yeah.
well, it's even worse than that. It's that he's a whiny emo bitch in all of the worst possible
Well, he
ways.
has no empathy.
And he
He's just
kills people
like,
now.
yeah,
which
it's like,
apparently-
They
which
and that's the thing,
retconned
it's like,
that.
which I
They
hate.
retconned
Did they
When-
retcon that already?
when he...
I hated that. Yeah.
when he is being hard, and I'm making the douchebag quote fingers, it reads like somebody who was fucking bullied in high school trying to be hard. It doesn't.
Yeah.
There's no like when Garth Ennis writes The Punisher. That shit writes like he fucking writes like somebody who's gonna kick the shit out of you,
Yeah.
and so he knows what to say. Like, I think Garth Ennis writes those kind of warlike stories a lot better.
Well,
But
look at who everybody thinks is like the hard ass, the badass right now in Batman, which we've talked about a ton of times on the show. But it's important to realize their relationship. There's a great Batman Superman story where they're like interviewing this thug or whatever, and it's Batman being good cop and Superman being bad cop, and Batman's like, "You should really tell me the information," and he's like, "I won't tell you," and it's like, well, he's not gonna ask politely, and his eyes like start to light up like laser vision, and he's like, okay, I'll tell you. People are afraid of Superman, even though he
absolutely.
is this symbol of hope and this symbol of like he has the utmost empathy for people. He does not tolerate crime.
no,
He's not like, oh, he was just getting food for his family. He's like, I'm gonna stop this crime, and if I can also provide for your family while you're in prison, I will help you do that.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
you broke the law. Something that like he stands for justice.
well, I think he's.
He's not Judge Dredd. He's not going to kill someone
Yeah,
because
yeah.
they broke the law.
Like,
But he
I don't-
he believes in upholding the law.
I believe that he believes in right and wrong, which
Yeah.
is allows him to kind of make distinctions. Like, yeah, he's going to stop somebody robbing somebody else regardless of the circumstance.
Right.
But he's also going, whereas Batman isn't fucking funding rehab centers or sitting down and
He
talking to
is,
people.
though.
Well, no, I mean, he is, but like, I always think that Bruce Wayne is doing that,
Sure,
and I
it's-
understand that that's
same
that's
thing.
a semantic difference.
But there's plenty of times in Batman's
But-
history where like he's caught this thug or broke this thug's arm because he was like interviewing him, and then he makes sure that he has like health coverage, to make up
Yeah.
for the fact that
No, totally. But what I mean is that at the end of the day, Batman and Superman are sitting in a diner as Batman and Superman, and everybody's like,
This
"What
is
the fuck
Kingdom
is
Come
this?
now."
This is Kingdom Come now, right?" And they're drinking
pregnant, Clark.
espresso, and Clark's drinking decaf clearly, and Batman goes, Superman goes, you probably didn't have to beat the crap out of that guy and string him from a light pole because he was stealing a loaf of bread. And Batman's like, well, yeah, but you did the same thing. But Superman's like, yeah, but then I went and figured out why he was doing it. And, I went and, wrote an expose on the slumlord that was fucking jacking up his rent or something.
But they both do this. They both do different things outside of the mask to combat these crime problems. Because even in like No Man's Land, it talks about like how much the Wayne Corp. All of that is giving back. Wayne Enterprises is giving back to the community to help it rebuild. And they both do stuff outside of their mask. But in the New 52. I feel like I've yet to see them be humanitarians in any way.
It is. You don't have to change Batman on any fundamental level, right? And that's exactly what they've done. Is they've been whole new universe, kind of a new universe, right? Because they're keeping all the shit. I was talking about this with Toby the other day. Above all my other problems, because I have problems with the way they treat characters, I have problems with the way they wrote it. But the thing that upsets me the most is the fact that this isn't a new universe.
No.
It's pretty much the same universe with a few choice things changed because they want their cake and eat it too.
Right.
If they were writing stories about a Joker that cuts his fucking face off and doing this, but they had started from scratch and they came out of the gate going, this is not a Batman you're familiar with. He doesn't have an origin story that you're familiar with. Then I could be like, well, I think that's stupid.
Or even if he had the same origin story, it's like, hey, we're going back to year one. This is the first year he's ever been Batman. Which is what they did after Crisis on Infinite Earths with both Batman and Superman. But they had kind of this shifting timeline deal. But I was talking about this on Top of the Stack the other day, is something that they're doing in the New 52 that really bothers me is they're just like, hey, that thing you like, here it is. They're banking on the fact that you already like that thing.
Yeah.
You have to explain, if you did a reboot all over again, why I should like these characters.
Right.
You can't just go, hey, it's that thing that you already know about.
It's whole new universe, but Batman, exactly the same as you remember him.
But it's not even, they'll show you the Authority, they'll show you, Animal Man, they'll he'll be in a book, and he'll just show up, and you're like, and? Yeah. And then they're like, no, it doesn't matter, moving on. Yeah. And it's you can't just show me a picture of a thing I like. That's not good writing.
Yeah, it's intellectually bankrupt. And the war on Superman is just a bunch of people that they're just catering to all those people that are like, Superman are boring. And it's if you want to fucking if you think Superman is boring, then why don't you fucking challenge yourself and write a decent story about him rather than making him
how about instead of saying Superman's boring, don't make the most boring bullshit movie you've ever made about Superman. How about that? I'd rather watch The Quest for Peace.
The problem with all of Warner Brothers movies, and we've said this before, is that they refuse to acknowledge that they're talking about comic book characters and that there's something.
That's Chris Nolan's.
Well, and he's the producer of Man of Steel, and Goyer wrote it, and it's got his fucking stink all over.
But that's not been the case for Warner Brothers forever.
No.
That's the case of very, very modern.
I felt like that with their TV too, though, where Smallville was so afraid to be a comic book show.
Yeah,
and I loved that show, but it was not a good show.
Which is funny because it had the mellow.
You know what I mean? It was my weird guilty pleasure. Arrow, I feel like they're slowly acknowledging that it is, season 2 is
introducing characters like Slade and those characters are very much comic book characters,
Yeah, and they're not, so I feel like they're starting to get it, maybe at least with Arrow, but even Arrow at first it was the same CW thing as Smallville, where it was in fact, at first it was this isn't Green Arrow, this is Bruce Wayne. This is Bruce Wayne, with a different costume. And thankfully, they've shied away from that.
Kind of Green Arrow's origin originally.
Well, he was a Batman clone, back in the 40s, and that was boring. And I'm used to the
liberal agenda.
Why am I trying to? Yeah, the Green Arrow, Green Lantern, the Daniel O'Neill, and Neil Adams. Those are the names I was spacing on. Their revamp from 1969. Yeah, that's.
It was a big.
When he had an actual personality.
It was an elevation of the character. Because we've talked about this before. Sometimes in the Silver Age, it was too much of just hey, chum, what's up, buddy? They could all
read the Justice League. They're interchangeable
characters, and it was about creating an identity, for these characters.
Yeah. Hey, buddy. Pal. Buddy. I was gonna say buddy, but then I thought I changed. But I think that the modern DC movie universe is plagued by this, is that they want to have the thing that makes the Marvel movies so good is that they're we have source material, right? We're going to firmly root our characters in that source material while telling a story that you may not have necessarily
also
seen
updating
before.
them. And,
Yeah.
But it's unabashedly like
A comic book movie.
comic book movie.
And it's fun. I mean, even when it's being really intense, it's fun.
Captain America: Winter Soldier is like one of my all-time favorite movies. Like I've already seen it like at least a couple times in the theater. But the thing is, like, I went back and I reread Winter Soldier, the comic by Ed Brubaker in anticipation for it, and it's hard. The movie wouldn't exist without the source material, of course, but honestly, I think the movie did certain things better.
Well, that's
Yeah.
what your cinematic universe should do. Is like, hey, we take the source material and we continue.
Because part of it's the
Accentuated.
continuity thing we're always talking about, like in the spoilers if you haven't read, like a 10-year-old story now. But in the comic, how Bucky gets kind of jilted out of his programming as Captain America holds the cosmic cube and is like, remember, and so he has to use this magic device from the Red Skull because there's all this like back history. And I liked that in the comic because it like had a lot to do with the Red Skull, one of his most famous villains.
And to be fair, they could have done it in the movie because the cosmic cube is a
thing.
But
thing.
again, but I'm glad that they didn't, because
Right.
the way they did it in the movie, it was purely an emotional reaction.
Yep.
It was like the fact that he stopped himself. There was no magic involved. There wasn't anything. It was like, again, I love the comic. Like the Brubaker one is one of my all-time favorite runs on a modern comic. But the movie, like, I don't know, it meant more, as far as their relationship was concerned.
Well, that movie, the greatness of that movie can be summed up in like two different scenes for me. The first is when he jumps out of the elevator.
Spoilers for this movie
for
that
Winter Soldier. No, it's
people
not.
may
It's
have
not
seen yet.
There's not. It's no plot point. It's merely just stunts.
It's
All right?
spoilers.
Okay.
Spoilers.
Spoilers.
I
if you
already
haven't
said
fucking
it.
seen-
We're good. I said spoilers.
Okay, wait. Did we tell them that there's spoilers coming?
Yes.
The first is when he jumps out of the building and lands on his shield, which felt like something completely out of a comic book and was awesome to watch.
Yeah.
And the second is just the end when he's running through that battery of bad guys and he's not like, I fucking hate when they're like, here's this character. He's a badass and he's got to stop and fight every fucking henchman, and that's going to take 5 minutes apiece.
Yeah.
Because no, like a badass would be like, as he's running, going, I'm going to hit this guy here, here, and here, and he's going to be down, and I'm not even going to break stride. And then, like, Cap feels like a superhero throughout that whole things. He feels heroic in a very super way.
Yeah, well, when he punches guys, they fly back, like they recoil from his punches.
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
he's so
exactly.
strong. But I think that what is great about that was the Winter Soldier Ed Brubaker story was a continuation and refinement of the ideas that had come before in Captain America. The Winter Soldier movie was a refinement and continuation of the ideas from that comic. It wasn't, let's take that and change it completely. It
Yeah.
was like, let's take what worked from that and make it work in another medium. And that's what works. Like,
And it was
it's-
more streamlined. It was a lot
Yeah.
less convoluted. It made sense within the... Because I've actually gone back and rewatched... This is how sad I am. I rewatched all the Marvel movies after seeing that one because, there's some key reveals that will make you look at the other movies differently. After seeing Winter Soldier. But yeah, I like that there's an in-movie continuity, but even with that, you can watch. It's not necessary. You can jump on with just Cap Winter Soldier and watch, and it's one complete story, and you won't be confused at all. If you watched, the first Captain America, I think it's a deeper experience, but you absolutely don't have to.
Well, and you can go to the comic book stores and you can pick up a comic book that's of these characters, and you're going to be seeing, even if it's a storyline you don't recognize, you're going to recognize the characters. Tony Stark, he's arrogant. He's got a problem with authority.
Well, and this is the problem that I hear about the new Spider-Man movies. It's like they took all these characters, and instead of making new characters that were like the plot devices that they needed, they took these old characters and then just like deformed them into the plot
Into what
devices
they needed, yeah.
And that's something that is hard in movies. But when Grant Morrison talks about All-Star Superman, he talks about it as a distillation and like the perfect version of what he thinks as the greatest superhero of all time. Like, you can feel the homage, you can feel the love of this character that he has. Like, this isn't a new direction for Superman. It's not a reboot.
No,
this
it's not.
is what made him cool. Let's do that. for 12 issues. And although there's a lot of parts of this book that I don't particularly like at all, like, the end of the day, the story is worth it because the arc is so strong.
Yeah.
Even if certain single issues are, like, not so great, it's like, it doesn't matter, you know? It's supposed to feel like a collection of kind of short stories, but at the end, it's this overarching arc of the 12 Trials of Superman.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. And I think the great thing, like, I was talking to Kirby about this, I would never recommend this as, like, a beginner Superman book.
No.
But if you came to me and said, I've read Red Sun, I've read Birthright,
Yeah.
I've read some of the pre-New 52 stuff because don't even bother with the New 52 stuff where Superman is concerned with.
Yeah.
But, and I really want something, like, I want something else. Like, I want something a little heavier. I'd be like, read All-Star Superman.
Yeah.
Check it out because this is going to be, I love that word distillation.
Yeah.
That's really what it is.
See, it's interesting to me because I actually start people with this book all the time. When
Yeah.
people come into
Well,
the shop and they're like, I don't know what I want, but I kind of want to get into Superman. Because I view it as like Superman's greatest hits. You know what I mean? So what I'll tell people is like, this is one of my personal favorites. It's not my favorite ever, but I love this. It's probably, it's definitely my top 10 for Superman stories. So I'll hand it to him and be like, if you love this, come back to me and tell me the elements that you liked, because that's the springboard then to, Birthright.
Well,
Man of
and there's
Steel,
a lot of
whatever it
people
is.
that come through the shop that are like, oh, I like Superman now because I read All-Star Superman, like, what can I read next? And it's like, well, there's nothing exactly like it, but I can show you some stories that it, like, was
That's why I have to ask them, like, what elements did
Yeah.
you like? Because it has so many cool things, like the Legion or whatever it is, and it's like,
And
it's like it's not quite. It's like almost Silver Age Superman as far as like his base power set. He's certainly more powerful than like the Golden Age Superman, but there's certain elements of Golden Superman, Golden Age Superman in there. But there's a bunch of different places you can go depending on like. Did you like how Luthor was portrayed? Because that's more of like a Silver Age thing, where he's in like a jumpsuit half the time. You know what I mean? There's a bunch of places that you can go. That's I guess what I like about it.
For sure.
Can we, like... This is my favorite. I feel like Grant Morrison really understands Lex Luthor, and I really am annoyed when people misunderstand Lex Luthor, just like I'm really annoyed when people misunderstand the Joker, which I think happens all the fucking time.
Well, I think this is such a simplification of Lex Luthor. It's overly simple. It's just like he wants Superman dead. Why? Because he thinks he's standing in his way, which is true.
Yeah.
But that's so simple. Like so many people try to make it more complicated than that. They put Luthor in Superman's origin. They make it like, oh, I want revenge because you took my hair, or any number of.
The best one.
That's my favorite.
That really
That
is
absolutely
the best.
is my favorite
This
one.
is funny because that's my dad read comics in the Silver
Yeah.
Age. He was born in 51, and that was the origin of Lex Luthor that I grew up understanding.
Oh, yeah.
And then I was reading in the 90s when it was Lex Luthor's clone.
Yeah.
And he had fucking all this, like, red hair. And, like, didn't he have a goatee,
Yes,
too?
he did. He had a full-on beard, and Supergirl was like...
Yeah,
It
like
was the whole-
Supergirl
but
is
there
like
was
a
the protoplasm
metamorph, and I'm
not
just
the real
like...
Supergirl.
I had no idea what was going on. Like,
Yeah.
I read The Death and Return of
Turn it
Superman,
down.
and I was just
Kirby
like, Joe,
just-
what is this?
What the fuck is going
happening?
on? And I'm like, don't
I was a
worry about
Marvel
that.
kid at the time. Well, still am, but yeah, like the Death of Superman was one of the first Superman stories I ever read, and suddenly it was like, like a long-haired, young Lex
the fuck
Luthor, and
is
then like
this?
a Supergirl that like wasn't Supergirl. It's like,
Yeah.
what the fuck?
Well, in that-
It was
in
like,
that
now
era
you're
at
jumping on point. If you never
DC
read Superman before.
That era at DC is really weird too, because the Justice League, like, seriously, if you don't read comics, especially in the 90s, you have no idea who fucking any of the Justice League was. Booster Gold, Blue Beetle.
Beetle.
Oh, it's the C team, yeah.
Fucking, like
Guy
Fire,
Gardner, yeah.
Guy Gardner, Maxima, which is like a queen of an alien planet that fell in love with
female
Superman.
Dr. Light
Yeah,
was in it
she
for a
was- she
while,
was
I
on
think.
there.
Oh, yeah.
This character called Bloodwind, which was like fucking DC's token image character.
There's
It's
this
like,
guy that
my
no
God.
one can remember. It's called Batman.
Batman. Well, Batman
Batman,
isn't.
right?
Batman
Have you
was
guys heard of-
only.
Wait,
That guy?
what does he do?
He's
Batman
a really
ditched-
obscure guy. He's a Green Arrow clone, I'm pretty
Bateman?
sure.
He is. He is.
He's called Bateman.
Batman left.
Bateman.
Batman left Max Lord's JLA after
Yeah.
the first 6 issues because
But
he was like,
in
"Fuck you guys,
well,
you're
he
crazy."
and Martian
I-
Manhunter were the only two original members of the show. Anyway, no, DC was crazy, and like the Death and Return of Superman, although it was like cool exploration of like what the world would be like without Superman. I don't think it was anywhere near as good as DC's later attempt at what the world would be like without a Superman, which was 52.
Oh no, I
And
agree. I agree with you
explored
on
that
that
idea a lot more.
But then
I think,
Go ahead.
I mean, like in All Star Superman, it kind of is like at the end, it has that little part where it's like, where's Superman? Like,
Yeah.
what are we going to do without Superman? And then, like, at the end, you still have like hope with that.
Well,
like,
yeah.
they're like, do you think he's coming back? And
it's like, I think it was Toby or Brant on the last show, was like, he made sure that the world would be fine without
Yeah.
him. You know,
Yeah.
like he
yeah, I
left
like that a lot better.
yeah.
I wasn't a huge fan
By
of Death and Return of
instilling a
Superman.
secret
It's not
Girl,
good.
but, like,
Because why? It's because
You
it's
didn't
not a
love
good
the
story.
mullet?
I mean, I was going to say, except for the mullet, that part was the best.
I
but
love the
Alright.
Death and Return of
killer.
Superman on purely nostalgic reasons.
Sure, yeah. No, as a history of, as like someone who loves the history of the DCU, like I like
Oh,
to
I enjoy it,
read
but it's not a- it's
but
not-
it's
No,
not
no,
a good
jumping
story.
on
It's the
point.
book
It's
you pull off your
certainly not.
bookcase and like blow the dust off the
Yeah.
spine, and you're like, remember this when
Yeah.
people could get away with this?
Remember the
I
olden days.
remember
Superboy
those
had like
days.
the earring and the leather jacket.
Oh, my
Oh,
God.
yeah.
cool.
Looking at
Actually,
the
he was
then,
probably
like-
my favorite part of that
So
book, honestly.
fucking cool.
Like, he
Can I
was,
just
like,
say
so-
that I love when I think it was Jim Lee that put Wonder Woman in pants and the jacket with the sleeves rolled up, and then
That
DC was like,
super recently.
it was super
They did
recently.
it back in
and
the
the thing-
90s too, though.
Yeah.
Well, they
When,
had her in the. They had her in the.
oh, gosh.
White pantsuit.
I mean, that was. I thought that was in like.
They
the
did something
80s.
in '91 or '92 where she like temporarily had like pants and like a jacket. Different than the Straczynski stuff. It was very short lived.
I know in the modern age
No internet for
when
people to freak.
Perez was writing her, she was in like black spandex with a leather jacket. But I always thought the first time I saw that Wonder Woman design, I was like, she looks like Superboy in like the 90s. And then everybody was like, this looks stupid. And they're like, oh, well, we're going to put her back in her original like swimsuit costume. And I'm like, wait a minute. So you're like, we put her in a bad costume and nobody liked it. So we're going to put her back in the old stupid one. Like,
I
how does
liked
this-
that redesign with the jacket.
I mean, I liked it.
It looked nothing like Superboy Prime, except that they're both wearing jackets.
No, it looked like fucking Superboy.
It did
Like
not.
with the fucking rolled up sleeve. I was
That's
like, where are you going,
How else
Miami
are you gonna
Vice?
punch things?
And-
You don't want your sleeves in the way when you're punching.
There is no fucking reason for it. Like, I've seen infinite
cool.
redesigns of Wonder Woman that look 1,000 times
Well,
better.
again, Wonder Woman is a warrior character, and so
Yes.
like,
The
she
Our
looks
Worlds that
coolest
wore armor, that's
in
the
the
shit.
armor,
She
yeah.
just wore that shit all the time.
Oh, my
Like, she
God.
looked
Oh, I
badass.
can't
I love
remember
it when
that one.
anytime she's like,
It was
oh,
like fucking, almost looked like a hawk
Yeah.
or something. Like the hell.
Oh,
it was
yeah,
like, it was all,
she's got the
super
fucking-
metal.
yeah.
It looks rad.
That
It's
is
probably a
very
bitch to
cool.
draw. But
Anytime she's
she's
like-
actually like a warrior in that. Like that looks
shit's
awesome.
about to get
And you
real,
can't
and
see
she's
her
like
boobies,
putting
which is-
armor on and like
fanboys don't
putting
like them
swords away. It's
That's
like, all
fucking
right,
cool.
cool, I'm down for this character now.
Well, and she wears that in Kingdom Come, too, doesn't she?
She wears something
I think
similar.
she wears a variation.
She puts on the
it,
fucking,
yeah.
like, the hawk,
Yeah.
like, the eagle
Like,
helmet,
that's just
and she's got the
ballin'.
sword that Superman
yeah.
cuts himself on because it's magic.
Yeah.
Superman hates magic.
Everyone is weak to magic,
Everyone is weak to
including
magic.
Superman.
Except...
That's the logic.
Did you guys
Magic
read?
Man.
Are you guys reading Superman Wonder Woman right now?
no.
There's
No, it
It's
makes
actually
me
really good. I
angry.
swear to God, it's
I
actually
don't-
good. No one believes me. No one believes me.
I don't read any DC books.
Well, there are a
because,
few that like uncharacteristically slip under the radar that are not New 52 Superman.
Well,
like
yeah, 'cause I
Unchained
was-
is like that.
Unchained is actually amazing.
It
and
feels
its ending,
like
of course.
pre New 52.
Well, that's the thing. Going back to the editorial thing. It's like Scott Snyder is writing like '90s Superman, like except it looks like New 52 because they took his underwear. But even like
They gave him it's battle armor, Manix. He
Right.
needs because he's totally impervious to any kind of
battle
physical
under his-
damage. He needs battle armor.
Well, to be fair, he would be running around naked a lot, I think, because his clothes would burn off of him. all
Okay,
the time.
that's
Which,
But
to be fair, I don't really have a big problem with.
But if you
it's
read
just to say.
if you read
That's fine.
Unchained,
To throw it out there.
he's heroic for one thing, so it's obviously not New 52 right there. And he likes people, so it's not New 52.
And he saves people without killing anyone.
And he has a relationship with Lois.
Yeah.
Like
he
in that
off the
story,
cheese?
he very genuinely cares for her.
Yeah.
And it's like they don't even acknowledge that the other person exists hardly at all. And like it's like even if they weren't married or whatever, you get like there's like they hardly know each other at all. Like
Well, because he
come on,
doesn't
we
work
don't
at the
have to-
planet anymore. There's
It's
like
just
no
dumb. I
reason
hate
for
it.
them
It's
to
dumb and I hate
interact,
it. But in Chained, he's actually heroic and he likes Superman and he feels like the Superman that I fell in love with, not anything to do with the New 52.
Well, he comes up against basically a stronger, more powerful version of him. And it's not like a dumb thing like Doomsday.
yeah.
It's like an intelligent thing that is like, look, I'm here because I'm better than you. I can
Yeah.
crush you. Like, how are you going to defeat me? And it shows Superman overcoming obstacles without punching it really hard.
Well, that's
Which
what's
is
interesting
cool.
too, because it's like that's not what's interesting about Superman. It's not that he's the biggest and the strongest, because
Right.
he's not always. I mean, normally on Earth, yeah, he is like, but like that's not what's interesting at all.
Right.
Yeah, and like that story, that Scott Snyder clearly gets it, and it makes me so sad that this book is already ending.
Well, it's so sad that he has to write in this universe, because I would have loved to have seen the Scott Snyder run on Batman and Superman in the old 52, in like the old the Crisis era DC.
Actually,
like as a continuation of that.
For those who don't know, my boss Eric Troutman is a writer as well, and a comic book writer. And I've asked him before, because one of the big complaints that everyone has about the new 52 is just like, including the creators involved in it, is the editorial interference, and seemingly Scott Snyder doesn't have nearly the level.
Yeah.
And so I finally asked him one day, I was like, why do you think that is? Because, like, I love Scott Snyder. I think he's fantastic, but he's a relatively newcomer into comics. He's not, like, I mean, if people like Jim Lee and, like, bigger names, if they're getting fucked with more, like, guys that have been around for 20 years, like James Robinson and stuff, like, they've been around for, like, 20 plus years. If those guys who have careers and have a fan base, if those guys get fucked with by editorial so much, like, how's it someone like a Snyder somehow able to like bob and weave through that? I mean, I'm glad he is, because his stuff, like again, like Unchained, I love it. I love that book. When they do like a collection of all 9, I will buy it. Eventually, someday. It'll still be hard.
Maybe
giving DC money will still be hard,
Yeah.
but I do love that story. And his Batman overall is really, really, really good.
Yeah, Court of Owls is very solid.
Yeah. Overall, his run is great, and even like, because I remember at first he said that year 1 was still in canon, because as far as he knew, it was.
Right.
And now we're getting year 0, where it's like, well, it's clearly not. But even with that, he is still trying to. That's what it makes me think too. If his writing is this good now, with all the roadblocks, God, what would it be like you let him just do his thing, and you let all the creators do their thing? I mean, have editorial, like, streamline things and get books out on time, but
they're so good at that.
Instead of being so worried about like your house style, so like things have to look a certain way and like characters have to like act a certain way all the time. I feel like there's so much focus on that you can't see the forest for the trees, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know how some of these writers like seem to avoid the editorial like bullshit that everyone else has to deal with, because it just gets in the way of creative ideas. And I think I mentioned this briefly before on the main episode 57, and also it's going to be something I'm exploring in like a new video thing that we're making for the YouTube show. But stories like this, like World stories, are so important to the universe, because when you have stuff that exists outside of your house style, you have the ability to like incubate and test ideas that then you can later fold into your universe, or not at all. Like if they don't work, or if they're too weird, like you can just leave them as their own thing. But ideas like Kingdom Come would permeate the DC universe later, because it was such a strong story.
Yeah.
But at first, it was out of continuity. And so if it had been bad at the end, it was like, okay, we get to skip it. And something that DC's having a problem with now is they're so concerned with everything being in continuity that nothing can be like ignored at a later point, because it was like, oh, well, that was just an Elseworlds or imaginary story. And I think that really, if you're Marvel or DC right now, you should be making like 50% of your books coming out Elseworlds or What If or outside of continuity stories, because it gives writers the opportunity to play with your characters in a way that they never got to play. We would have never gotten stuff like 1602, which we talked about on a previous show, like from Neil Gaiman, who's a fantastic writer. Like, we'd never get anything like that if they had been like, Neil, you have to be 100% adhered to all like 400 plus issues of X-Men history. If you make a mistake and you don't stick in our house style and it's not exactly like, you would have got the same generic bullshit that any writer could have written, because there's only so much you can do within those constraints.
Oh, absolutely.
And I am all for creativity through constraint, but at some point there is too much constraint.
Like three of my I think some of the coolest stories DC ever wrote, and some of my favorites are Elseworld stories. Like Gotham by Gaslight, which is
Oh,
Batman
the Doom
in
that came to Gotham too.
Yeah, that's also a really good one. These are both Batman in like Victorian London. Gotham by Gaslight is he's hunting Jack the Ripper.
Well, he's just come back from England, and they
right,
think
he's in.
that
Yeah, okay,
Bruce
yeah.
Wayne is Jack the Ripper because there's now murders happening
Right,
in Gotham
because he
that
comes
are
back.
similar, and they're
That's
like,
what it is.
"Oh, well, he just got off the boat, and he was in London where there were murders. Bruce Wayne must be Jack the
Dead,
Ripper,
right?
And so he's like trying to catch the guy
Yeah.
as Batman,
And
but
it's
Bruce
got-
Wayne's like under scrutiny. It's cool, and then
Yeah.
Doom that came to Gotham is like this very like Lovecraftian,
Yeah.
Mignola take on Batman in Gotham.
Well,
and-
Mignola does both of them. I mean, Mignola did all the art for
Yeah.
Gotham by Gaslight, and his Batman character design is crazy awesome.
Yeah.
But-
And then there's like 9 Lives, like the noir detective Batman stuff. Like there's so many good Elseworlds stories.
There's I was telling Kirby this. There's a Superman story that's an Elseworld story where Superman gets found by the Waynes. It's called Speeding Bullets, and he basically, when Thomas and Martha get shot down, like bullets are bouncing off of his chest, and then he becomes Batman. He's like. Which is it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's kind of a silly idea, but it's done really well. And then there's one where Batman finds Abin Sur and gets the ring, the Green Lantern ring, and that's called In Darkest Night with a
K&I,
knight, like
yeah.
medieval knight. And the cool thing is that whether or not the stories hold up, because it's been years since I've read those last two. The character designs were fucking awesome. It's like, what would Batman's costume look like if he was a Green Lantern, or what would Superman look like if he was Batman? It's just like, it's such a neat idea.
It's just, it allows you to be creative, which is the most important thing about any creative medium.
And I really believe if you don't have that outlet, those ideas will fucking sublimate into your work.
Well,
and you'll start to like nudge things and stuff, and it'll just make the rest of your work suffer, because then you can get that, if you have that outlet, you can get that story out.
Well,
and then
look
you can,
at Final Crisis as compared to this.
Yeah.
Like, Final Crisis would have been an amazing Elseworld story because he could have done more with it. He could, if he had 12 issues instead of 6 issues, 7 issues, and had been like, hey, Grant, here's this thing. You want to write about, like, the craziest apocalypse that could ever happen in the DC universe? And he's like, yes. And he gets to write that. It would be great because it would be like this, where it's like, read this. It's not necessarily in continuity, but it's a cool idea based on stuff that came before.
Yep.
And then next month's writers wouldn't have to go, wait, what the fuck just happened? And have to like somehow make the universe work again.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that this is like the Elseworlds, what if, imaginary stories. Those are the kind of places that you can do just really
what you
cool
want,
stuff.
yeah.
And
And that's where people like Jeff Johns would shine. That's where people like a lot of, I think a lot of what DC wants to do, I think there's a place for that in an Elseworld. Like, you have fucking 52 worlds. Use them.
yeah,
There is
absolutely.
no fucking reason. I mean, like, the way DC handled the Silver Age, basically saying, yeah, all these stories, they happened. They just didn't happen on this main Earth.
Right.
They happened all over here. And having that as an outlet, it's like Jeff Johns could go crazy on Earth fucking 13, writing
Yeah.
stories about Barry Allen and Hal Jordan and how
Right.
awesome they are. And then you could bring in somebody that actually wants to see Bart Allen as the Flash, as he rightfully fucking
Right.
should be, and do something cool with that rather than...
I'm sad that Guggenheim never really got the chance to do that. But
Yeah.
something that Toby mentioned on last show was it's worthy to note that one of DC's best-selling books right now is Batman 66, which is 100% an Elseworld story.
Yep.
And Superman Unchained.
Well, isn't it?
Yeah.
100% an Elseworld.
It's the
It's the
Batman.
anniversary for it. Isn't that why?
No, it's
It-
Adam West. It's like basically
it's
the comic book
basically-
version of the Batman TV show.
There's been a
Yeah.
real
What was the-
resurgence lately in the popularity of 66. They're doing all kinds of
well, Mike Allred's
Because
doing
Mike
all
Allred's
those
doing
covers.
those covers.
Yeah, which are beautiful.
there's a real resurgence right now, and the show's finally going to come out on DVD and Blu-ray.
But
Yes.
that being said, is it's like they took and they were like, hey, let's tell an Elseworld story. And they did it digital first, which is a big deal.
yeah.
And then they did it as an Elseworld. And it sold like fucking hotcakes. Like,
Yep.
this is a great idea. Injustice, their other really high-selling
yeah,
digital first book, is also an Elseworld story. Like, those
Yeah.
should be indications of like what people are interested in.
I mean, I've read Injustice
Earth
and it's
One,
awful, but
it doesn't.
I know
It
people-
doesn't
No, but it's
matter.
Elseworlds.
It doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
it's
It's like
Elseworlds.
that's the thing.
That's
Is
fine.
like if we hate the main universe, but there were Elseworlds books that we would enjoy, we could actually give DC money. Unlike
Yep.
now, where we
we
don't
can't
give
give
them
them any.
any,
Yeah.
because everything falls under this umbrella. It's like if you have Elseworlds, then you have a little bit for everyone.
Absolutely.
Like there's
I
something
agree.
at your universe or something. So we may hate Injustice, But it doesn't matter because
Yeah.
if someone else is buying, it's like, that's perfect. I would give up if there were like 10 Injustice books. I don't care as long as there's like Gotham by Gaslight and like Fred Son and
Yep.
this or, you know, Unchained. Like I would give, I'm fine with them putting out a bad book every once in a while as long as they were also putting out these other
Decent
cool
books.
ideas that
Or-
I could dig into.
Yeah.
So what I like about World's Finest and Earth 2 is it's like they feel like I can forgive them more because they're kind of these Elseworldsy stories.
Yeah.
I think that happens kind of naturally though too, because like different writers have different images they have
Yeah.
for, like, you know, you could be like, oh yeah, well, we've got like All-Star Superman, then Mark Waid has like this other Superman. They're basically the same, but they have like little differences about them on how, you know, that person views them. So
Yeah.
you get a different story.
Yeah. And as long as they're like maintaining what they feel to be truest about the character, then it's like you're getting a different version of that. I don't know. I think the Elseworlds books, I think this particularly works so well because it's out of continuity.
Yeah. And I don't really I agree with you on that because I think I'm for what Elseworlds represent more than I'm for like every Elseworlds having to be awesome. I don't care if I like it. It's the idea that they were letting people do what they
Right.
wanted to do.
And I like this book, but if this were the mainstream weekly Superman book or monthly Superman book,
What could you
I
do
would
with that?
I would hate it.
Yeah.
I would absolutely hate it.
I'm actually for a much more. I mean, I think continuity is great and everything, but I'd really like to see many more writers doing this kind of thing where they're just like, oh, you want to write a Batman story? You got 12 issues. Give us your best shot.
And also, just like, could you not then make your main universe more
Streamlined.
kid friendly too?
Oh, well, yeah.
Because it's like, hey, a kid goes and sees Batman the TV show, and he's like, "Mom, I want a Batman comic." And you hand it to him, and it's like a guy with a fucking cut off face over his face, being like, "I'm gonna kill your whole family," and it's like, what? This is not for a kid. Like, why? Kids are attracted to Batman. They wanna
Girls
read
and kids
Batman.
don't read DC Comics, Chard. Haven't you heard?
No one
I mean,
reads DC
the
Comics, but-
experts have girls and kids don't read comics at all.
They
Did
don't.
we mention at all
I don't.
Grant Morrison's Action Comics run in the New 52 as it relates
No,
to this at
we
all?
didn't.
Well, it's interesting to note since one of the things that we love about this book is, you know, it was a limited series. It was a 12-part distillation. The whole point of it was a celebration of Superman. We have seen what Grant Morrison's
Does with, like-
rebooted take would have been, and it started pretty interesting.
Yeah,
for me, at
actually,
least.
I kind of like.
I actually enjoyed it at first because what he did is he when Superman started in 1938, you know, he wasn't like super powered. You know, you believe that this version of the character could be killed if like a tank shot him or something. You know, like a police getting him, it's like he'll laugh or whatever. But you know, couldn't fly, didn't have heat vision, didn't have any of the extrasensory powers at all. Basically, he was just a hyper tough guy, and he was still from outer space. But you know, they slowly started to roll that stuff out. But since this was the height of the Depression, he was a champion of the people, which is really interesting because it came to be a kind of like a goody two shoes in a lot of people's eyes. But it's like he's like beating up
slumlords
wife
a lot.
beaters and like he takes a crooked politician and like runs his ass to the police station.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm not gonna go with it, pal. And like he's like, you know, beating up slumlords and stuff.
Yeah.
So like all the things that were like real world problems he was dealing with them and just being like the strong arm. But he
But
was
surprisingly,
he was almost a bully himself, but he was like the bully for the people that was like, how dare you slap? And they like literally slapped him. And like there's people that like would die in that book. He wouldn't kill them, but he also wouldn't save them. Like, that's what you get for being a criminal. And they would like fall to their death and like he would like laugh.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, like that was like
Super slap.
yeah, well, that was like the original, you know, version, and Morrison took elements of that, not nearly as dickish, but certainly more of a dick than we had seen Superman be in a long time. Where he was like this younger kid. His outfit, I hate it. Like, for the
God, 'cause
record,
it looks awful.
For the record, it's jeans, like black leather
Ew.
boots,
If-
and like a Superman
but
T-shirt with a cape.
If you like to
A
hear
T-shirt with a cape. It's
In the
worst.
first 6 issues,
more
though,
relatable
he
now.
finds the
He does.
Kryptonian battle armor.
He does, but
in Brainiac's ship. So it's only 6 issues of that, which
I still hate it.
It's still
I know.
awful.
I know, it's just a thing.
If you'd
I
like to
agree.
hear my thoughts about Superman's Action Comics costume in the New 52, you can just go back and listen to our early episodes
Yeah.
where I am constantly complaining. I think there's an episode where I just randomly scream out half cape
Yeah.
because I was
Oh,
so...
I'm sure that happened.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a thing. I think it's episode 3 or 4 where I'm just like, half cape!
Yeah.
But when the New 52 started, you know, they went with a more golden age version.
It was
of
very
the character.
arrogant.
Yeah, very cocky, very, you know, still trying to be a champion of the people. And at first, I think I thought what they were going for, where it's like, well, this is a younger man, and you could still believe at this point that he would grow into the Superman that you knew and loved, you know? Kind of like what they did with, like, Wally West or something, where it's like when you first read Wally, he was kind of a punk, and then, like, but he grew as a character.
Right.
But then, you know, instantly within the New 52, you flash forward to, like, 5 or 6 years later.
Yeah, you have that book.
Still, well, like in like the Justice League, which came out right before that, he's a dick still. So it's like, well, shit. Like, because I thought Morrison actually had some really good ideas. Towards the end of his run, like Morrison usually does, it falls fucking apart completely, and it's like all the stuff on Mr. Mixaplexic, and it's really
Well, they also
confusing.
told him that they were going to end it. So I think he just kind of like jammed a bunch of shit in there.
I love Morrison when he has a very clear end date on a book, and it's usually like shorter than he probably wants it to be. And when Morrison's someone I think actually needs editorial control.
Oh yeah,
because like his Batman run was like that too. Loved it at first. Towards the end, I was like, get this man off this book now. Get him off this book. Get him off. Get him off. Get him off. And I loved the beginning of his run. It was just like, you killed Batman twice in a month, you psycho. Like what? Like how do you do that?
Yeah.
That was someone was at the I don't know, I had to push up my nerd glasses because some guys like, oh, they've never killed Batman. I was like, oh, actually the same writer killed him twice in a month, and that was only like 4 years ago, but he was like, oh. I was like, yeah, it's happened, believe me.
How do people not anyway,
that's a whole other conversation.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, but
yeah, I think we should probably move on to recommendations.
Yeah.
And because we already know what we're reading for next week, which is Next Wave, so that episode should drop in a couple days. Next Wave Agent of Hate is what we're reading for the weekly show. We're just going to do kind of what we do for the long run, which is like, if you enjoyed this, what do you think you should steer people towards kind of next? So, Joe, enjoying this book, if people liked it, what should they read next?
Well, I get shit for this sometimes, but I love Emperor Joker. I think it's a solid read. I think it's one of Jeff Loeb's stronger stories, and it's basically Superman wakes up. He's in a black costume, and the world.
Don't forget the sexy stubble.
Oh yeah, no, he's got sexy stubble. I think Ed McGuinness does the art.
It was a crossover, so it was Loeb and McGuinness did like parts of it, but then it was also like Joe Kelly and like Mark Schultz, I think, was still. So it was a crossover
people.
within.
It was one of the.
They were still doing triangle numbering at that point. It was the very, very end of the triangle numbering.
Right,
system.
But basically, the world has gone fucking crazy, and all he knows is that he's not what they say he is, which is a murderer and like a lunatic, and. It's basically him trying to figure out what's going on. But I think it's incredibly creative. It's a super cool look at like Superman squaring off against a villain that he very rarely does. And the end of it has one of my favorite Superman moments, which really, for me, it's a moment that really shows what Superman is about in a really cool way. So yeah, Emperor Joker. It's a lot of fun.
Nice. Was that Elseworlds as well?
I'm trying to think here. I don't think it was.
It was in continuity. I mean, it was like an alternate reality.
Yeah.
But at the end of the alternate reality, it's back to like.
It's back to
for
normal,
the time.
Yeah.
So it was a post Crisis on Infinite Earths and pre-Infinite Crisis. So that the story, starts in canon, goes to an alternate reality, like something like Age of Apocalypse or the X-Men did, and then it goes right back into being an in-canon story.
Right.
All right.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, it's close. That's kind of almost an Elseworlds.
So yeah, basically, if you
in continuity elsewhere. Anyway, whatever. Eric, what do you think that people should read if they?
It's considered an imaginary story, which was like the old school way of having an Elseworlds, basically.
Yeah.
Alan Moore wrote the last issue of Action Comics and Superman before Crisis on Infinite Earths. That's Action 583 and Superman 423. Basically, if he was allowed to kill off the Silver Age version of Superman, which was a character so powerful he could move planets and he didn't have to breathe if he didn't want to, and as
friends with the Legion
of superheroes, so he could fly under his own power 1,000 years in the future and hang out with them, usually as Superboy, but sometimes as Superman. And there was like Crypto and Beppo the Super Monkey, and there was like there was Legion of Super Pets as well. There's a ton of extraneous stuff.
Super Wars too.
There was Streaky the Super Cat.
Supergirl had the cat and the
There's
horse.
a ton of elements that they decided were super lame by 80s standards, and so the idea, of course. But the reboot was to streamline that back to Superman being, which is basically what we got, Man of Steel, which I do love. But that was like super streamlined, a lot more cold, sterile version of.
You mean
Krypton.
Man of Steel, but
Man of
John
Steel.
Byrne.
Yeah. That's
Not
like
the movie.
No, yeah, God no. But so in this story, we get an epic Brainiac, Lex Luthor team up. In more ways than one, you'll see what I mean if you choose to read the book. But it's super heartbreaking. It's a ton of the supporting cast for that time are just killed off, and like the major status quo changes if this had been considered in continuity.
Yeah.
But it's one of my, in fact, this might be my favorite Superman story. It's hard to say. It's really, really up there for me.
Did you ever say the name of this, or was I just not paying attention?
Whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow is the name of this story,
which is one of my absolute favorites. And it was kind of like an alternate take on like, hey, if we hadn't done a reboot, where would this maybe
I think
go?
we talked about this in our Crisis one, but the interesting thing is after Crisis and in Infinite Earths, even though they started with like Man of Steel, you still, like when Superman #1 comes out, he's fully a man, and there's still like a time gap in there, even from like Krypton exploding and all that stuff. There's still a jump, so because DC's never fully committed to a reboot ever, so you could still assume that some things maybe happen somewhere in there, even with this power set. And they did retcon things later, where it's like, oh, he still had a history with the Legion, but he has to travel with the time bubble.
But then he did.
The poor Legion has gotten the shaft many times. But this story, it's just 2 issues. There's a hardcover and a trade paperback. I think it's just called Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. But it's also got the 2 other Superman stories that Alan Moore did, because he only did 3 ever. One of them is DC Comics Presents 87, which is a cool team up with Swamp Thing that he was writing at the time, and Superman Annual 11, which is for the Man Who Has Everything, which is an awesome one shot story. So that collection is super worth it. Yeah. But that's my pick.
Yeah,
it's basically.
I think you can also get it in the Alan Moore Presents DC.
You can with a ton of other stuff.
It has like some Green Lantern stuff in it, but I don't think it has for the Man Who Has Everything in it.
I don't remember.
I don't remember.
I got mine. I have the physical ones because I bought them at my local shop, the Danger Room, years ago. The individual issues, and I bought them on Comixology for $1 a piece when they had a 99-cent sale. So that's my pick.
All right, Kirby. You love Superman.
I love Superman, and the book that I would recommend is, sorry, Joe's like motioning to me.
Joe's being annoying as usual.
Yeah, he's really frustrated with him right now.
I'm a spooky ghost.
Oh my god.
Okay, my pick was Red Sun. Which is another one of my favorite Superman stories, which is why I'm recommending it. But essentially, it's if Superman landed in Russia instead of in the United States, and it has kind of the same properties that makes Superman, where he's always trying to help people and doing everything he can. It's been a while since I read it, but one of the things that always stuck out to me is like there's a scene where like there's these people waiting to get food, and they're like, he's like, why aren't you getting food? And they're like, oh, because the government's not giving us food. So he's like, I'll be the government then. And then he like goes and is awesome.
Yeah,
so.
it's a kind of a continuation in some ways of the ideas of Miracle Man, where it's like, well, I'll just rule everything and make it more efficient and like try to create a utopia by being your king god.
Yeah, and Batman wears a cool hat in it too. Yep. And
so Batman is legit.
I have that action figure around here somewhere.
Really?
Yeah, because it's like the coolest Batman action figure ever.
Yeah.
He's got like the Soviet Russia like warm fuzzy hat with the ear flaps on it. So good.
Yeah, so that was my pick. It's got kind of the same sort of stuff where like Superman's just kind of being awesome and for the people, and it's it's different because he's in Russia.
Sweet.
But even Superman raised by a fascist dictator will still be a sweetheart.
Well, he's still raised by farmers though.
Yeah,
he's still raised by the people.
Yeah.
You know, and that's
it's more of like the government also being like, oh, well then, we'll take you. And
and they like try to mold him and stuff. But at the end of the day, like I think his intentions are still of like he's the people's champion, which is kind of the idea that he has in America too. So it was a cool take. It wasn't like, oh, now he's like a communist. It's just like, he is a communist because he operates in that system. But like he still cares about the everyman.
Yeah.
Like, he's the champion of the everyman. So.
When people bitch about Superman and they say, I want like a harder, whinier Superman, instead of doing like New 52 Superman, I'd say read Irredeemable.
Yeah. It's basically like, what if Superman snapped?
Yeah, it's like crazy, evil, asshole dick Superman, and it makes me love real Superman more, because he could do that if he wanted to. He chooses not to.
Right.
Because he's a good
And that's
person.
Mark Wade.
Also Mark Wade.
Who knows
Mark Wade gets it.
what the fuck he's doing.
Mark Wade does get it in more ways than one.
He is... yeah, I love that.
Mark Wade's
that
written
man is
the
an
most
amazing
awesome
author.
Superman.
Yeah.
Most of my favorite Superman. He has the highest concentration of my favorite Superman stories with Kingdom Come.
I think he has the highest concentration of my favorite comic book stories.
Yeah, I was
He's
gonna
up
say,
there for me.
favorite superhero books definitely are
he's up
mostly
there.
Mark
Fucking
Wade.
his shit on the Flash is incredible.
Kingdom Come?
His Kingdom Come is incredible. Daredevil is incredible.
Yeah, he's
Man,
so
his
good.
JLA stuff
Yep.
following Grant Morrison is awesome. Man is awesome.
Yeah, he's a great writer. Which leads me to my next pick, because I think that if you really enjoy Superman stuff, because there isn't a Superman that exists in the way that you want it to, there's with the New 52, I kind of think you have to go to independent books, and so I'm going to recommend two. The first one being Invincible, which we talk about all the
No-brainer.
fucking time. So I'm going to skip, like, just mention that, and then say Astro City, which is something that we've talked about a lot. But if you pick up that first trade of Astro City and you just read that one story with, what is he called? The Samaritan in there. There's just like a beautiful Superman story. Mm-hmm. And just that first issue, you don't even have to read the rest of Astro City, because not all of it focuses on that Samaritan character, but read that one issue. Read Kurt Busiek fucking absolutely get it.
Yeah.
And also, I think everyone should read John Byrne's Man of Steel, but it's dated, and so a lot of people want to. But that first Samaritan issue in Astro City is like mind blowing.
Yeah, and everybody should also read Birthright if you're.
Yeah.
I mean,
we talk about that a lot.
Yeah.
Well, I talk about that one a lot.
It's my favorite origin story for sure. So, all right, guys. Well, thanks for listening to our bonus episode. Listen to us rant about Superman for hours this week. And, yeah, we'll catch you guys later.
Yeah.
Yep.
Bye.
Later.
Love you.
Bye.
Later.
Thank you for listening to Me From the Gutters. I hope our recommendations have inspired you to go out and find some new comics you'll enjoy. Join us next time for a discussion of our selected title, but like every week, we encourage you to read all of the recommended books. In the meantime, please leave us an iTunes review. It really does help new listeners find the show. You can also like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube, and follow us on Twitter at ViewFRTHGutters. Feel free to email us at contact@viewfromthegutters.com. Please send us any questions, comments, or recommendations you might have. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel as we post new videos every week. And thanks again for listening. And as always, keep reading.